They say history is written by the victors, yet some chapters remain sealed, locked in shadows even decades after the fall of the Third Reich. Whispers of secret experiments, hidden bunkers carved beneath mountains, and technologies so advanced they seem torn from the pages of science fiction. Evidence destroyed, witnesses vanished, and questions left to haunt the edges of our collective memory. What if the Nazis uncovered something the world wasn't ready to face? Strange artifacts smuggled out of ancient deserts, unexplained aircraft sightings above snow-covered Antarctica, scientists who disappeared overnight, leaving behind only fragments of impossible research. And when Allied forces stormed Europe, they didn't just find weapons and documents. They found rooms so bizarre, so unsettling, that files remain classified to this day. This isn't fantasy. This is the part of history most textbooks refuse to touch, where ambition, obsession, and fear collide in chilling mystery. So settle in, take a breath, and prepare yourself. Because today, we're stepping into the secrets they never wanted the world to uncover. Let's dive in. Deep beneath the ruined government quarter of Berlin, the air is still, thick with dust, concrete, and the weight of history. The crumbling remains of the Führer bunker lie hidden beneath modern streets, erased from maps, sealed off from the world. Above it stands a quiet residential block, ordinary and unassuming, as if history itself attempted to bury the final chapter of Adolf Hitler's life beneath layers of asphalt and time. Here, according to the official record, on April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler ended his own life as Soviet forces closed in around the city. The bunker, once a hardened fortress of steel and reinforced walls, became a tomb for an empire collapsing in on itself. Officers burned the body in a shell-scarred courtyard. Remains were hurriedly buried, then reburied, and eventually reported destroyed by Soviet authorities decades later. The accepted story feels decisive, final. A dictator defeated, a war ended, justice, if not served in a courtroom, at least completed in a moment of absolute downfall. Yet, even in a war documented with unmatched precision and countless eyewitnesses, questions linger. Was his body positively and unquestionably identified? Who controlled the narrative in those chaotic final days, and why did key details remain classified for years? Why did conflicting testimonies emerge even from those who claimed to have been inside the bunker? Here the mystery begins. After Berlin fell, the Soviet Union took charge of the remains, but instead of closure, they provided ambiguity. Reports shifted, documents disappeared, and officials contradicted one another. At times, Soviet leaders publicly cast doubt on the suicide, suggesting Hitler may have escaped, raising a chilling possibility that fueled Cold War suspicion and global speculation. In the aftermath, witness statements painted vivid yet inconsistent scenes. A quick cremation under artillery fire, charred remains, hurried burials. No photographs exist of the body. No universally accepted forensic proof survived the turbulent handoff of evidence. Then came the physical fragments. Soviet archives later revealed a jawbone, allegedly matched to Hitler through dental records. A skull fragment surfaced too, yet modern DNA testing reportedly determined it belonged to a woman, not the dictator. Was it a simple mix-up in the chaos of war? Or evidence that even those tasked with preserving truth could not say for sure what happened beneath Berlin's crumbling streets? Outside Europe, curiosity ignited into theory. South America, particularly Argentina, became a focal point. Documents declassified decades later showed Allied intelligence agencies investigated claims that Hitler had fled. Witness sightings, intercepted communications, even reported submarine landings fueled a trail of questions across remote jungles and coastal regions already known as havens for high-ranking Nazi fugitives. Did the world's most infamous dictator manage to slip through the ruins of his empire and vanish into a new life abroad? Or were these simply the echoes of paranoia shaped by the trauma of war? Even today, researchers debate the authenticity of the forensic evidence. Some historians argue the record is clear. Hitler died in the bunker, ending the ideology he wrought in violence. Others maintain that gaps in the narrative leave room, not for definitive alternative history, but for thoughtful examination of how fear, secrecy, and power distort truth. And beyond the physical question lies another layer: psychology, control, legacy. If a regime so obsessed with myth-building and symbolism faced ultimate defeat, would its leader choose death in the shadows? Or would the illusion of disappearance serve a darker purpose, allowing uncertainty, whisper, and myth to linger long after the bullets fell silent? Today, visitors walk past the site unknowingly. No monument, no marker, only quiet ground and passing cars. The bunker remains buried, inaccessible, perhaps intentionally forgotten, perhaps simply left to history's erosion. But the silence does not erase the questions. A dictator whose rise was broadcast, whose speeches echoed across nations, whose face became one of the most infamous in recorded time, ends in a sealed concrete room, unseen and undocumented in his final moments. The most powerful man in Europe reduced to rumor, hearsay, and official statements written after the fact. In the end, the truth may be exactly what the history books declare, or it may be something lost in rubble, ash, and classified archives. What truly happened beneath Berlin that spring day? Was justice sealed in fire, or did history bury uncertainty beneath concrete and secrecy? Sometimes mysteries endure not because answers are hidden, but because the moment they vanish, they belong not only to history, but to legend. And here, in the shadows of a bunker long sealed from sunlight, that legend still breathes. From the dim corridors of Berlin's subterranean fortress, where Adolf Hitler's final hours dissolved into uncertainty, our attention shifts just a few steps away into the same collapsing city, the same maze of tunnels and debris. But this time, we follow the trail of a man who stood in the shadows, yet wielded enormous influence. A silent architect of power, and perhaps one of the most elusive figures to emerge from the ruins of the Third Reich. Martin Bormann. Stand on the streets near the old Lair Bahnhof, where modern trains now glide across polished platforms and commuters hurry through glass and steel. It is difficult to imagine the inferno that once consumed this very ground. Fire, smoke, rubble, and chaos as Berlin fell in the spring of 1945. Here, among shattered buildings and frantic escape attempts, Bormann was last seen. Officially, the story is simple. Bormann, Hitler's private secretary and one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany, died attempting to flee the besieged capital on the night of May 2nd, 1945. His body, many claimed, was discovered shortly afterward. Case closed. Yet history did not move so neatly. In the first years after the war, the world searched. Allied intelligence, military tribunals, and journalists all pursued the truth. Witnesses contradicted one another. Some swore they saw Bormann fall in a hail of fire. Others claimed he slipped away, alive, into the darkness. There were reports of a body buried hastily in the rubble, and other reports suggesting no one could ever locate it again. For decades, uncertainty ruled, and in that uncertainty, a chilling possibility grew: that one of Hitler's closest confidants had escaped justice. The world followed whispers. South America surfaced again. Argentina, Brazil, Chile, names already etched with tales of fugitive Nazis slipping quietly into new identities, remote farms, or cloistered communities. Intelligence documents revealed sightings, coded communications, even testimonies of meetings in secluded estates. Some described Bormann working as a powerful secret advisor, continuing to influence networks born from the ashes of the Third Reich. Others painted him as a ghost, never seen clearly, always just beyond confirmation. Could a man so central to Nazi power vanish without a trace? Or did the myth grow simply because so many wanted answers that Berlin's ruins could not provide? Then, in 1972, construction workers disturbed the earth near Lair Bahnhof. Human remains, a jawbone, soil that yielded secrets long believed lost. Dental records reportedly matched those of Martin Bormann. Scientific testing decades later, including DNA analysis, seemed to support that conclusion. And yet, controversy persisted. Why did Soviet records insist Bormann had escaped? Why did certain intelligence agencies, American, British, West German, continue investigating possible sightings well into the 1960s and 70s? Why did individuals with wartime knowledge claim, until their last days, that Bormann lived beyond the war? Some forensic experts raised questions about soil composition, suggesting the remains might have been buried later than 1945. Others pointed to the skull's damage, debating whether it aligned with battlefield chaos or modern disturbance. And if the body lay there all along, how did so many credible voices believe otherwise for so long? Perhaps psychology offers part of the answer. The collapse of the Nazi hierarchy was a storm of confusion, fear, and shifting loyalties. In the absence of certainty, rumors became possibilities, and possibilities evolved into theories. The world wanted closure. Instead, it received fragments. Still, even with DNA evidence accepted by most scholars today, a whisper remains in the historical record. The kind of whisper born not from fiction, but from the spaces historical documentation cannot fully illuminate. Was justice truly delivered in a trench beside a Berlin railway? Or did power, secrecy, and planning, the very tools Bormann mastered, allow him one final victory in the fog of defeat? Stand here long enough, and the modern station noise fades. You can almost hear the distant rumble of artillery, the hurried steps of men fleeing an empire's collapse, the crackle of radio messages broadcasting doom and orders simultaneously. Somewhere between those sounds lies the truth, or the unresolved echo of it. Because some mysteries do not end where evidence appears. Some mysteries persist because history, memory, and fear weave themselves into the story, and so we ask, quietly, without certainty, if one of the most powerful figures in Nazi Germany could disappear in plain sight, what else from those final days still lies buried, waiting beneath concrete, beneath documentation, beneath time itself? From the narrow streets of post-war Berlin, where whispers of vanished men linger like smoke, our path drifts outward, across borders, across oceans, and into a network many believe turned disappearance into strategy. If Martin Bormann's fate opened the door to doubt, then what came next would push that door wide, the shadowy world of ODESSA. Picture a dimly lit archive room in Buenos Aires. Dust settles on yellowed manifests, immigration logs, and faded passports stamped with new names, new nations, new lives. A world away from the shattered ruins of the Reich, yet intimately connected to its ghost. Here, in these quiet papers, lies a path followed by thousands. Or so the story goes. According to survivors, prosecutors, and fragments of intelligence records, ODESSA, said to stand for Organisation der ehemaligen SS-Angehörigen, or Organization of Former SS Members, was more than rumor. It was a lifeline, a clandestine escape network designed to smuggle high-ranking Nazis out of Europe as the Allies closed in. Rooted in underground cells, secret sympathizer networks, and covert support channels, it promised safe passage to countries willing, or persuaded, to look the other way. South America became the destination most often whispered about. Argentina, under Juan Perón, welcomed thousands of Europeans after the war. Some were innocent, seeking new beginnings. Others were not. Evidence emerged. False identities, Vatican papers repurposed by unknown hands, maritime routes that seemed always one step ahead of Allied intelligence. Investigators traced trails leading to quiet German-speaking towns nestled in the mountains of Chile and Argentina, to remote farms, to Alpine-style villages where European traditions persisted unchanged beneath unfamiliar skies. But was this proof of ODESSA, an organized, disciplined escape command, or simply a scattered combination of sympathizers, opportunists, and fractured networks built from desperation rather than grand design? The historical record walks a narrow line. Documented escape lines undeniably existed. The ratlines, as post-war investigators called them. Clergy, diplomats, smugglers, and former Nazi officials worked together to spirit fugitives across borders. Some famous names, Adolf Eichmann, Josef Mengele, surfaced in South America years later, their path into hiding clearly supported by powerful hands. Testimonies from captured SS officers confirmed planning and coordinated efforts in the final days of the war. Yet the structure of ODESSA itself remains elusive. Was it a single unified network, a myth amplified by media and post-war novels, or a label attached to a constellation of secret groups, Kameradenwerke, Die Spinne, and others, each playing a role in protecting fugitives and preserving ideology? Even intelligence agencies diverged. CIA and MI6 files acknowledge Nazi escape operations, but often stop short of confirming a centralized ODESSA command. Still, the sheer efficiency of some escapes raises unsettling questions. How did certain individuals obtain forged papers so quickly? Who financed relocation, legal defenses, and new enterprises abroad? Why did some fugitives receive warnings just in time to vanish ahead of investigators? Behind the escape narrative lies a darker possibility. One not only of men fleeing accountability, but of networks continuing influence. Reports emerged of former SS officers moving into business, banking, and international trade. Quiet partnerships formed across borders. Money flowed. Ideologies hardened in exile, nurtured in secrecy. Could ODESSA have been more than a rescue operation? Could it have become a seedbed for a hidden post-war power structure? Or did the fear of what Nazi networks might accomplish inflate their shadow beyond their reality? The truth drifts between verified history and what cannot yet be fully proven. Survivors of the Holocaust spoke of hearing about underground channels as early as 1944. Nazi hunters like Simon Wiesenthal pursued leads across continents, convinced such a network existed. And scattered declassified files suggest the Allies themselves worried, not about fantasy, but about the concrete possibility of organized escape and regrouping. Yet skeptics point out that chaos, not coordination, defined the final hours of the Reich. They argue that post-war narratives, driven by fear and outrage, built ODESSA into a monolithic specter when the real mechanisms were fragmented, improvised, and inconsistent. Still, look again at the quiet village plazas in Patagonia, where German is spoken as a mother tongue, at the preserved European traditions half a world away, at the faded photographs of men long believed dead posing with unfamiliar landscapes behind them. Listen to the testimonies, the coded letters found decades later, the intelligence reports stamped classified until recently. Patterns emerge, not proof perhaps, but echoes. History does not always reveal itself cleanly. Sometimes it leaves us with corridors half lit, documents half burned, and trails that lead somewhere just beyond clarity. So we ask, Was ODESSA a myth shaped by fear and fiction? Or a real hidden network, one that operated in plain sight, moving quietly through ports, churches, and embassies, reshaping the fate of men history meant to condemn? As the dust of archives settles and new files continue to surface, one truth remains unmistakable. The story is not finished, and somewhere in the gaps between fact and shadow, the mystery of ODESSA endures, waiting, perhaps, for one more discovery to turn speculation into certainty. From secret escape routes and whispered networks, we move now into the realm of something far more tangible, yet just as elusive. Wealth. Power sealed not in ideology or identity, but in gold. The kind that glitters beneath earth and water, rumored to rest in forgotten vaults and sunken trains. And so our journey continues to a northern lake framed by dense forest and wind-shaped pines, Lake Toplitz in the Austrian Alps. At first glance, it is peaceful. Clear, still waters stretch like a mirror beneath sharp stone ridges. Sunlight dances across the surface, but beneath it lies a world of darkness. The lake drops steeply into depths where light cannot travel, where old trees rest like skeletal sentinels preserved by the icy water. It is here, secluded and silent, that one of the most enduring legends of the Nazi era took root: the story of lost Nazi gold. The historical foundation is solid. As Nazi Germany faced defeat, the regime desperately attempted to safeguard assets. Gold, currency, cultural treasures, looted from banks, museums, and private families across Europe, vanished into vaults, tunnels, and armored transports. Some were recovered. Others remained entries in ledgers, rumors in intelligence reports, names on post-war recovery lists that abruptly ended without resolution. Lake Toplitz is one such location where mystery meets history. In the final months of the war, SS units sealed off the area. Witnesses described convoys arriving at night, crates lowered into the water. When the war ended and the Allies probed the lake, they discovered bundles of forged British currency, part of Operation Bernhard, a covert Nazi plan to destabilize the British economy through mass counterfeiting. The operation was real, the money confirmed. But the presence of the forged notes only deepened the legend. If money meant to topple a nation rested below, what else might lie there? Divers risked the cold depths. Expeditions dredged mud and timber. Crates surfaced, but none filled with gold. And yet, the belief persisted. Why? Because something about the lake remains unfinished. Restricted zones, unexplained military activity, and deaths among would-be treasure hunters have only fed speculation. Is it simply the perilous underwater terrain that keeps the secret sealed? Or something more? Beyond the Alps, the mystery widens across Europe. Poland holds its own legend, the Gold Train. In the chaos of retreating German forces, witnesses spoke of an armored train loaded with treasure, jewelry, art, gold bars, sealed in a mountain tunnel along the Lower Silesian rail network, never seen again. In recent years, ground-penetrating radar scans sparked worldwide headlines. Researchers claimed to detect a large buried object. Hope surged. Excavations followed, and yet nothing conclusively proved. Was the train ever real? Or did desperate wartime whispers evolve into myth over decades? Italy, too, has its tales. Sunken ships off Genoa, monastery vaults briefly commandeered as assets shifted south. Switzerland, neutral yet deeply intertwined with wartime finance, saw gold pass through its banking system, some traced, some forever lost in ledgers and coded accounts. And what of private hoards? Diaries recovered after the war speak of officers burying valuables in forests, beneath farmhouses, inside underground bunkers. Maps surfaced, cryptic and incomplete. Families returned to ruined homelands only to find empty cellar walls, stone pried open, caches removed, traces swept clean. The more we investigate, the more intricate the picture becomes. There was treasure. There were secret movements. There were attempts to hide and preserve. But how much was recovered quietly after the war? How much remains buried? And how much exists only in memory and rumor? Financial investigators estimate billions vanished in those final months. Wealth forcibly taken, never returned. Some of it did reappear, discreetly laundered through post-war banks, funding escape networks or building new lives in distant lands. Some surfaced in legal battles decades later when families reclaimed stolen jewelry or art. But a portion, an unquantified, haunting portion, remains unaccounted for. And here the deeper question emerges. Is the true mystery about treasure or about power, financial systems, coded transfers, relationships between governments, banks, and men who understood how to move wealth beyond borders and beyond notice? Perhaps gold does lie in a sunken vault beneath a mountain lake. Perhaps crates sit untouched in forgotten tunnels, sealed by wartime explosions. Or perhaps the treasure was never meant to be found, because its greatest value was not in metal or jewels, but in the networks it helped create, the silence it bought, the futures it quietly financed. Stand again at Lake Toplitz. Watch the sunlight fade from its surface as evening settles. Somewhere in that stillness, history murmurs. Not loud, not clear, but persistent. If so many tracks end abruptly in 1945, so many fortunes erased from record, what remains beneath water, earth, and secrecy? And how many more clues lie waiting just beneath the surface for someone with patience to listen to the quiet depths of history? From lakes steeped in silent treasure to tunnels rumored to guard forgotten wealth, our path now turns toward a mystery not measured in gold at all, but in possibility. If the Nazis sought to preserve power through hidden fortunes, some claim they also pursued something far stranger, power over nature itself. And so we travel to a remote corner of southwestern Poland, deep within the Owl Mountains, where pine forests stretch over ridges and abandoned concrete structures lie cracked beneath moss and vine. Here, near the ruins of a vast underground complex known as Project Reese, stands a peculiar concrete frame, quiet, isolated, and deeply unsettling. A ringed structure, weathered by time. Thick pillars arranged in a circle, like the ribs of some mechanical cathedral unfinished and forgotten. Locals call it the henge. Researchers have come to examine, to photograph, to speculate. Was it a support rig for heavy machinery? A cooling tower base? Or something else? This is the setting for one of the most debated Nazi mysteries of all, Die Glocke, the bell. According to a handful of post-war accounts, particularly from a former SS officer interviewed decades later, Die Glocke was a secret device developed under the Reich's most clandestine science division. A bell-shaped machine, metallic and heavy, filled with rotating cylinders. Inside it, a mysterious substance referred to as Serum 525, said to glow and radiate danger. When activated, the device allegedly emitted a powerful field, capable of affecting organic matter, bending space, or perhaps even time. These descriptions read like fragments of science fiction, yet they are rooted in historical context. The Nazis did pour enormous resources into experimental technology, jet aircraft, rocket propulsion, early guided missiles, ideas that shaped the world after 1945. Laboratories worked on nuclear physics. Scientists explored advanced propulsion systems and radiation research. And deep in secret facilities, projects operated without public record, supervised by men whose loyalty was enforced with fear and silence. Could Die Glocke have been one of those experiments? A radical energy program? A weapon? or a myth born from scattered testimony and post-war imagination? The accounts continue. Witnesses described strange tests conducted in a hidden chamber. Plants and animals brought into proximity with the device reportedly died or decayed rapidly. Scientists were said to suffer illness, headaches, bleeding, tremors, as if exposed to something toxic, something beyond known physics. There were claims of glowing light, distortion, even temporary weight anomalies. And then there is the suggestion, never confirmed, never fully dismissed, that in the final days of the war, the machine and several scientists vanished, evacuated in secrecy, transported through unknown networks, or perhaps destroyed to prevent capture. Some point to South American sightings. Others reference classified Allied documents that mention unusual technology seized or missed during the final push into Germany. Skeptics argue the entire story rests on too few sources, distorted by time and intrigue. They remind us that the Reich experimented with exotic prototypes that left behind artifacts and blueprints, while Die Glocke leaves only rumor and fragments. Yet questions persist. Why was such a large underground complex built in the Owl Mountains, vast tunnels never fully mapped or excavated? Why do some files from Nazi scientific divisions remain sealed or incomplete? And why does the concrete structure near Wenceslas Mine look unlike other wartime industrial bases, raising eyebrows among engineers who study its design? Across the decades, researchers, historians, physicists, and conspiracy theorists have all grappled with this mystery. Some link Die Glocke to early nuclear experimentation, comparing the alleged symptoms of exposure to known radiation effects. Others propose a high-energy propulsion test, perhaps akin to research that later surfaced in advanced aerospace programs. A few reach further still, into theories of anti-gravity, time displacement, and technology not yet understood. It is easy to dismiss such ideas. And yet, history has taught us caution. Technologies once considered impossible now define modern life. Secret programs have surfaced long after wars ended. Scientific progress often begins not in certainty, but in questions. So we stand in the forest, before a ring of concrete rising from damp soil. Listen to wind moving through the trees. Imagine engineers and soldiers working here under cover of darkness, machines humming deep underground. Imagine crates moved under guard, coded reports burned before retreat, corridors sealed beneath rock and earth. Could Die Glocke have been real? An experiment cut short by war, its knowledge lost or hidden? Or a legend woven from fear, ambition, and the ruins of a collapsing regime? As long as documents remain classified, as long as the tunnels remain sealed, and as long as fragments of testimony refuse to align or disappear, the mystery endures. Not loud, not certain, but persistent, like the whisper of machines that may never have existed, in a place where history and imagination meet in uneasy silence. And somewhere in that quiet, one question lingers. What truths lie buried beneath mountains and archives, waiting for the day when the world is ready or able to uncover them? From the dim corridors of bunkers and burned documents tracing the uncertain end of Adolf Hitler, we step now not forward in time, but backward into a shadowed realm of ideas, symbols, and secret societies. If the final days of the Third Reich leave us wondering how a regime closed, then this mystery asks a different question entirely. How did it begin? And what strange currents shaped the minds that built it? Deep beneath the bustle of modern Munich, where cafes and universities now fill the streets, archives still hold quiet, yellowed pages stamped with occult emblems and cryptic seals. Among them is a name that surfaces like a whisper in the half-light of history: the Thule Society, a group that met not in sprawling halls or public squares, but in private rooms, behind doors adorned with runes, rooms lit by candle flame and filled with murmured philosophies of race, destiny, and ancient world orders. Founded in 1918, the Thule Society outwardly presented itself as a patriotic nationalist group rooted in German folklore and cultural revival. But beneath that veneer lay something far stranger. Its members were not merely political thinkers. They were mystics, seekers, and romantic dreamers fascinated by Nordic myths, secret histories, and the imagined homeland of a lost Aryan race. They believed in Thule, a mystical northern land described in classical texts, where a pure ancient civilization may have once existed. Was it a place of myth? Or did they believe it could be found? Among the dusty documents are unmistakable connections to names that would later shape the Nazi movement. While Adolf Hitler himself may not have been a formal member, some of those around him were. Dietrich Eckart, a poet, spiritual guide, and one of the earliest influential figures in Hitler's rise, moved in these circles. The German Workers' Party, precursor to the Nazi Party, had roots directly tied to Thule members. Did this ideology seep upward into the political sphere, shaping the language, symbols, and beliefs of a rising movement? Verified records confirm rituals, oaths, and gatherings. There were lectures on mythology and race theory. There were sigils and swastikas, used long before they were stamped across an empire. There were rumors of mediumship, spiritual contact, and attempts to unlock ancient energies tied to the Germanic past. Mainstream histories describe the Thule Society as fringe intellectual mysticism, eccentric but not supernatural. Yet others point to strange documents, stories of seances where spirits were supposedly consulted, and claims of a hidden elite seeking arcane knowledge. Was this simply historical ornamentation added later? Or did some individuals genuinely believe they were awakening forces forgotten since antiquity? As the movement shifted from secret rooms to public rallies, the Thule Society itself faded from official records. Members either joined the mainstream political apparatus or quietly withdrew. But traces remain. In symbols, in language, in myths woven into a modern ideological tragedy. Some historians argue the Thule Society was merely a footnote, an intellectual curiosity with little direct influence. Others see it as the germ of a darker spiritual project, one that would later manifest in expeditions to Tibet, obsessions with relics, and attempts to combine politics with mysticism. And then there are the more speculative theories, that the Thule Society continued in secret, that its members preserved hidden texts or occult knowledge, that the spiritual ambitions of early members did not vanish but transformed, surviving in underground networks long after the war. There are claims of classified Allied intelligence files, of whispered post-war gatherings, of beliefs that the power once sought by the Thule adepts was never truly abandoned. Is this merely myth-making, projecting mystery onto history? Or do some legends endure because they contain a kernel of truth? Even today, scholars debate where the documented ends and the imagined begins. The Thule Society stands at a crossroads between verifiable history and speculative legend, between the mystical revivalism of the early 20th century and the political machinery that followed. It raises uncomfortable questions. How do ideas rooted in myth and esoteric symbolism grow into ideologies that shape nations? Did these men simply romanticize the past, or did they truly believe they were unlocking ancient racial destiny? And if so, what else might they have been searching for? As we leave the quiet archives of Munich and the flickering shadows of candlelit lodges, one thought lingers. For every document preserved, how many were destroyed? For every symbol deciphered, how many remain hidden in the folds of history? And in the long chain of causes that led to one of humanity's darkest chapters, what role did belief, strange, secretive, mystical belief, truly play? In the end, the Thule Society remains an enigma, suspended between history and myth. Its influence may be overstated or underestimated, and perhaps some mysteries are not buried in ruins or lost in battle, but hidden in the minds and dreams of those who once believed they were shaping destiny. From the dimly lit salons of the Thule Society, where myth, nationalism, and mysticism intertwined, we move now into territory even more elusive. If Thule was a bridge between esoteric thought and political power, then what follows drifts further from paper archives and recorded minutes into whispers, rumors, and a strange idea that refuses to fade. Beneath a quiet old building in Berlin, its brick facade now softened by time, there is said to have once been a meeting room lit by low lamps and heavy with incense. Marble floors, polished dark wood, and walls lined with books on hidden sciences, Eastern mysticism, and forbidden philosophy. The air here, in imagination or truth, seems to vibrate with the weight of things unspoken. It is in these shadowed corners of historical rumor that we encounter one of the most enduring Nazi-era enigmas, the Vril Society. Unlike the Thule Society, the Vril Society leaves behind no publicly confirmed membership lists, no official charter, and no formal records. Mainstream historians often describe it as a legend, a creation born from mysticism, wartime myth-making, and post-war fascination. Yet the story persists. It begins in 1871, decades before the rise of Nazism, when English novelist Edward Bulwer Lytton published The Coming Race. In the novel, an advanced subterranean civilization harnesses a mysterious energy called Vril, a limitless power capable of healing or destruction. Fiction by all accounts, but ideas have lives beyond the page. By the early 20th century, certain occult circles in Germany became fascinated with the concept. They wondered whether Vril was not invention, but revelation. Could there be a hidden force in nature, an ancient energy once known to lost civilizations? Could enlightenment, power, and even technological advancement be unlocked through it? Here, historical certainty grows thin. Some researchers argue that a secret group formed to pursue this force, blending Eastern esotericism with Germanic myth, meditation practices, and early pseudoscientific theories about human potential. Others dismiss the society entirely, calling it a later fabrication layered onto wartime mythology. Still, references surface in unexpected places, in letters, journals, intelligence reports, and the writings of occultists who claimed knowledge of a hidden order searching for Vril. There are stories of seances, of attempts to contact unknown intelligences, of women with long hair believed capable of channeling energy or receiving guidance from beyond the earth. Some fringe accounts claim that members studied ancient Sanskrit texts, believing the Vril force to be the same energy described in Vedic traditions. Did they seek spiritual transcendence, or a weapon unlike anything the world had seen? Then there are the more speculative threads, the ones linking Vril to German scientific ambition. Did ideas inspired by mysticism influence Nazi research into propulsion, advanced aircraft, or exotic technology? Some suggest that Vril ideology fed into secret engineering projects, that whispers of disc-shaped craft and experimental weapons trace their roots here. Others argue that such theories are layers of myth built on coincidence and imagination, confusing spiritual symbolism with scientific record. Even within conspiracy archives, uncertainty reigns. Did the Vril Society truly exist as an organized group? Or was it a myth embraced by later writers who wanted to explain the dark allure of Nazi ideology through occult origins? Intelligence agencies after the war collected reports on Nazi esoteric beliefs, some vague, some elaborate. Were they chasing truth or simply documenting rumor? The mystery deepens with claims that the society did not disappear but retreated further into secrecy. That after the collapse of the Third Reich, its members vanished, taking with them knowledge, relics, or technologies beyond public understanding. Some stories speak of escape to distant lands, to hidden bases, or even, more dramatically, to realms beyond Earth. These theories are often dismissed by scholars, yet they persist in the margins of historical imagination. Why? What gives them such staying power? Perhaps it is not the documents, or lack of them, that compel interest, but the idea itself. A secret group seeking ancient power, a forgotten science, a bridge between mystical belief and technological ambition. It is easier to understand tanks and planes than spiritual conviction. Yet history tells us that belief, especially belief in destiny, in superiority, in hidden knowledge, can shape events as profoundly as any machine. As we leave the silent hall in Berlin, memory or myth, one thought lingers. In a regime obsessed with power, technological, racial, and philosophical, could there have been yet another current flowing beneath the surface, one that blended spiritual yearning with scientific pursuit? Or is the Vril Society simply a mirror, reflecting our own fascination with lost power and hidden forces? Some mysteries endure not because they are proven, but because the questions they pose resist easy answers. In the quiet between fact and speculation, we are left to wonder, if there ever was a society seeking Vril, what exactly did they hope to unlock? And if they succeeded, even in part, where might that knowledge be now? From whispers of secret lodges and occult currents flowing beneath the surface of the Third Reich, we shift now from the realm of belief and speculation to something far more concrete, yet no less mysterious. Paper, ink, sealed folders, coded transmissions, records meant to capture power and control. And yet, so many of them simply vanished. Picture a quiet, climate-controlled chamber deep beneath a European archive facility. Metal shelves stretch in careful lines, holding boxes of brittle documents, yellowed pages, stamped seals, and typed orders once signed by men who reshaped nations through ruthless ambition. Each file a thread in the vast web of the Nazi state, its rise, its crimes, its hidden operations. But for all that survived, for all that was seized after the war, one truth remains unavoidable. A great deal is missing. Some losses can be traced to chaos. Burning furnaces in Berlin as the capital crumbled. Trucks loaded with files vanishing into the night as Allied forces closed in. Orders to destroy communications, directives, and intelligence reports rather than allow them to fall into enemy hands. History records Nazi officials personally lighting bonfires of paperwork, thousands of pages curling into ash as the regime collapsed. But the scale of what disappeared goes beyond battlefield panic. It hints at something more deliberate. Among the most debated absences are files related to high-level SS operations, financial networks, and secret research units. Documents that, had they survived, might illuminate clandestine funding channels, covert diplomatic efforts, or technological ambitions. There are intelligence memos referenced in other correspondence that no longer exist, implying a paper trail whose end abruptly drops off. Researchers whisper about missing shelves in archives, sections where lists of existing files once appeared in catalog books, yet the records themselves are nowhere to be found. Where did they go? Mainstream historians point to World War II practice: destroy everything compromising. The Nazis, after all, were meticulous record keepers. If they wished to erase something, they would do so methodically. Some German officers were known to have buried chests of documents in forests or remote estates, hoping to retrieve them later. Rumors persist of such caches still lying hidden beneath rural soil or submerged at the bottom of alpine lakes. Then there are files seized by Allied intelligence. The United States, Britain, and Soviet forces each raced to collect Nazi records. Vast collections were sent to military intelligence centers for analysis. Much was later declassified, but not all. Some portions remain restricted, classified under national security, intelligence collaboration, or diplomatic considerations. A simple explanation: governments rarely declassify everything. And yet, questions linger. Why do certain gaps correspond neatly to topics that continue to provoke debate? Secret weapons programs, foreign intelligence networks, occult research groups, financial trails leading to neutral countries, escape routes used by high-ranking officials. For every documented operation uncovered after the war, another seems to have slipped beyond reach. More speculative theories suggest intentional concealment beyond wartime destruction. Could select officials have spirited documents out of Europe along escape routes, alongside the individuals they protected? Could Allied agencies have withheld politically sensitive records? Some fringe researchers suggest that captured files may have influenced post-war intelligence programs and thus remain hidden for reasons that have little to do with history and much to do with continuity of power. Others whisper about private collections, archives acquired by industrialists, intelligence veterans, or those who benefited from wartime secrets and have no interest in seeing them exposed. A conspiracy? Or simply the untidy reality of world conflict and its aftermath? Even today, archivists occasionally stumble upon misfiled documents in municipal basements or locked cabinets forgotten in administrative offices. If such discoveries surface in small local repositories, what might still lie untouched in deeper, older vaults? And what of records rumored to have been taken east, stored in facilities once controlled by Soviet intelligence, still cataloged in languages unfamiliar to Western historians? The missing Nazi archives represent more than lost paper. They symbolize the boundaries of knowledge surrounding one of history's darkest regimes. We know much, but not everything. And perhaps it is the absences that provoke the greatest unease. What strategies were never revealed? Which alliances were hidden? Which truths remain inconvenient, even decades later? In the silence of that archival chamber, among rows of preserved evidence, the missing shelves speak louder than the filled ones. They ask us to consider the fragility of truth in the machinery of power. They remind us that history is not only what was recorded, but also what was erased, stolen, or deliberately concealed. And so we wonder, if those lost documents surfaced today, what would they reveal? Would they reshape our understanding of the war, expose forgotten actors, or simply fill quiet gaps in the record? Or would they hint at something more unsettling still, forces and decisions that never fully died with the Reich? Some mysteries lie in forgotten vaults. Others rest in silence itself, waiting for the day when locked drawers open, or when someone remembers where they were buried. From shelves of vanished files and whispers of lost intelligence, we move now into a different kind of archive, one built not from paper and ink, but from human secrets murmured in moments of vulnerability, where records did not always exist, yet information flowed nonetheless, and where truth, seduction, and manipulation intertwined behind velvet curtains and locked doors. In a quiet Berlin street, once lined with polished stone facades and discreet brass plaques, stood an elegant townhouse. From the outside, it appeared refined, respectable, an address befitting diplomats, officers, and high society. But step inside, and the world changes. Heavy drapes soften the light. Velvet couches and crystal chandeliers cast warm glimmers across polished wood. Perfume lingers in the air, mingling with cigarette smoke and the murmur of hushed conversation. Laughter here was not careless. It was sharpened, directed, a performance. This was Salon Kitty. Officially, it was an upscale brothel. In reality, it was one of the most sophisticated intelligence traps engineered by the Nazi security apparatus. Overseen by Reinhard Heydrich and operated under the watch of SS intelligence chief Walter Schellenberg, Salon Kitty served as a listening post, a place where influential guests believed they were indulging in private pleasures, unaware that their every whispered confession, frustration, or boast was being captured through hidden microphones embedded in walls and furniture. The women employed there were not ordinary workers. They were trained in psychology, interrogation, and conversational manipulation. Their mission was not merely to entertain, but to extract information about rival factions within the regime, foreign diplomats, industrial leaders, military officers. In a regime where internal loyalty was never guaranteed, where ambition and suspicion coexisted uneasily, Salon Kitty became a quiet battlefield. Records confirm the operation existed. We know the command structure. We know some details of its methods. Yet, as with so many Nazi intelligence projects, substantial pieces are missing. Testimonies contradict. Official files are sparse, fragmentary. Some reports surface only decades later, while others appear conveniently vague. Did every guest truly remain unaware? Were all recordings genuinely destroyed when Allied troops approached Berlin? And what information, if any, was leveraged after the war? There are stories, unverified yet persistent, that Salon Kitty did not only target foreigners or political elites. Some claim party officials used it to spy on each other, to gather leverage within the internal power struggles of the regime. Others suggest that, at times, the house became a trap for those suspected of disloyalty, a way to lure them into compromising situations before quietly removing them from favor or public life. Then come the more unsettling rumors, whispered on the edges of archival research. Suggestions that not all recordings were lost, that some tapes or transcripts resurfaced in private intelligence circles after the war. That information extracted in those intimate chambers may have influenced later negotiations, recruitment of Nazi intelligence officers by Allied agencies, or post-war political maneuvering. No proof, just shadows, coincidences, brief archival notes hinting at files that once existed but are no longer accessible. Authoritative historians tend to remain grounded. Salon Kitty was real, highly controlled, and ultimately short-lived. When bombs fell and Berlin fractured, the operation collapsed. But history rarely closes cleanly, and where gaps appear, speculative theory grows. Was Salon Kitty simply a tool of wartime espionage, a calculated extension of state surveillance? Or did it represent something deeper in the psychology of the regime, an obsession with control so complete that it reached into the most private corners of human behavior? Even the building's later fate carries intrigue. What remained after the fall? Furniture stripped, equipment removed, records burned, or relocated. Some accounts claim Soviet intelligence briefly examined the site. Others suggest that Western agencies attempted to trace individuals connected to the operation. In both cases, little entered the public record. Walking those quiet Berlin streets today, few clues remain to indicate what transpired behind those doors. The city has rebuilt, moved forward, reshaped its memory. Yet there is a sense that, beneath the cobblestones, beneath layers of history and reconstruction, secrets still linger, like perfume clinging to velvet long after the room has emptied. And so we are left to wonder, what did Salon Kitty truly reveal? How much was learned within those whispered conversations? How much was quietly buried? And what does it say about a regime so consumed by fear and ambition that even pleasure became a weapon? Pleasure. Some mysteries live in archives. Others live in whispers. But the most enduring ones, perhaps, are those seated in silence, waiting for the day someone asks the right question and a forgotten answer finally rises to the surface. From sterile laboratories and forgotten archives, we now step into a colder, quieter space, where glass cases once held specimens and polished instruments gleamed beneath harsh white lights. A place where academia and atrocity converged, where science, stripped of ethics, became a tool of cruelty and ideology. Imagine a medical theater at the height of Nazi power. White tiles, spotless floors, steel basins reflecting overhead lamps, charts pinned neatly to boards, bones arranged for study. The silence here is clinical, precise, measured. Every surface suggests discipline and order, yet beneath that veneer lies something deeply unsettling. Because among these sterile walls, a project was carried out that remains one of the most disturbing symbols of how far extremist ideology can twist human inquiry. It was a plan to build a physical collection of human skulls, taken from Jewish victims. The idea was conceived not for medical advancement, but to serve a regime desperate to justify its racist worldview. Leading figures in Nazi racial theory sought anatomical proof to support their beliefs. And so, under the guidance of SS researchers and academic collaborators, individuals imprisoned in concentration camps were selected, photographed, examined, measured. They were treated not as human beings, but as biological specimens in waiting. The victims were murdered, their remains transported to an anatomy institute to be prepared for study. This is not rumor. Trial testimony, fragmented SS correspondence, and post-war investigations confirm the existence of the plan. Some remains were later recovered, identified, and given dignified burial. And yet, for all that we know, questions linger in the shadows. The full scope of the project remains unclear. The exact number of intended specimens is still debated. Some records were deliberately destroyed during the final months of the war. Others simply vanished amid collapsing administrative systems. A few surfaced decades later in archival boxes, their content disturbing but incomplete, suggesting more may once have existed. Who initiated every step? Which officials approved which phases? Did every participant face justice? The historical record presents names, roles, and signed directives, yet gaps persist. Some scholars argue the project was narrowly focused, born of a handful of particularly zealous ideologues. Others suggest it reflected a broader institutional willingness to allow science to serve ideology, provided results aligned with the regime's vision. And then there is the physical legacy. Most identified remains have been buried with respect. But over the years, occasional discoveries in European anatomy collections have raised painful questions. Could additional bones connected to this program still lie quietly mislabeled or forgotten in university storage rooms? Institutions have conducted searches, audits, and ethical reviews. Still, the uncertainty lingers. Museums and medical schools from this era are not strangers to unclaimed specimens, and shadows of history do not always fall neatly. Then come more complex possibilities, whispered at the intersection of archival research and speculation. Did certain files escape destruction and end up in private hands? Were any remains smuggled out during the war by individuals seeking to preserve their work or hide evidence? No proof stands firm. Yet the very nature of the subject and the secrecy with which these acts were conducted means absolute clarity remains elusive. What does it say about a regime and about humanity when science is so easily bent toward dehumanization? When academic authority is used not to illuminate truth, but to reinforce hatred? Most chilling, perhaps, is how ordinary the tools once appeared. Scales, calipers, notes written in precise script. The language of medical research wrapped around a project born not of inquiry, but of ideology. A reminder that evil does not always announce itself with chaos. Sometimes it wears a white coat, speaks in clinical terms, and frames cruelty as scholarship. Today, the rooms where such research once unfolded feel haunted, not by spirits, but by moral weight. Empty tabletops, archived files bearing gaps, quiet corridors where institutional memory grapples with uncomfortable truth. Universities, historians, and communities continue to examine records, identify remains, and confront the legacy. And still, the silence raises questions. Have all fragments of this project been uncovered? Have all records been found? Were all those responsible fully held to account? Or do hidden papers, forgotten drawers, and unrevealed testimonies still wait somewhere, in a private archive, a sealed government file, or a basement cabinet no one has opened in decades? In history's darker corners, certainty is rare. What remains are traces, partial files, recovered bones, and the knowledge that human ambition, unrestrained by ethics, can turn even the tools of science into instruments of horror. The mystery endures not in supernatural shadows, but in the faint, unsettling gaps between what we know and what may still lie quietly hidden. From the quiet halls of academia, where human lives were once reduced to specimens and measurements, we step now into a very different kind of silence, one not of laboratories, but of landscapes. A silence broken only by wind through pine forests, the distant drip of water in forgotten tunnels, and the soft shifting of earth over secrets long buried. Because if the last mystery revealed the chilling extent of ideology disguised as science, this one deals with another kind of pursuit. Power built not on theory, but on steel, concrete, and ambition. Across Europe, from the Alps to the Baltic, there are places where the ground still holds echoes of a war that promised weapons beyond imagination. Sites where enormous bunkers sit half-buried beneath moss and soil, their concrete walls cracked but still imposing. Thick steel doors welded shut. Stairwells descending into darkness. Corridors carved into mountainsides that seem to go on forever, only to stop abruptly at sealed chambers or collapsed rock. These locations, some mapped, many not, were part of the Nazi regime's secret weapons program, a sprawling, desperate effort to develop technologies capable of reversing the war's tide. Some of these projects are well documented: the V-1 flying bomb, the V-2 rocket, humanity's first long-range ballistic missile, jet-powered aircraft, and experimental submarines. They were groundbreaking, terrifying, and real. Yet alongside them lies a darker, more obscure record, one shrouded in rumor, fragmentary paperwork, and scattered testimony. Whispers of advanced weapons research carried out deep underground, schemes sketched in notebooks, discussed in coded reports, or referenced only in passing by scientists and military officials after the war. Weapons that were planned, and perhaps built, but never fully revealed. In mountainous regions once controlled by the Third Reich, hikers sometimes stumble upon concrete entrances half swallowed by the earth. People who explore abandoned mines occasionally find reinforced steel corridors branching from natural tunnels, corridors absent from official maps. Local legends speak of train tracks vanishing beneath hills, of convoys observed entering forests and never seen exiting again. Some of these stories are exaggeration. Others are supported by archival fragments and wartime reconnaissance images. A few are backed by post-war Allied investigation records, pages noting unexplained shaft, unknown facility, or incomplete documentation. Why incomplete? Because as defeat loomed, German officials ordered the destruction of sensitive files. They flooded tunnels, detonated charges, and burned records. In many cases, entire facilities were collapsed intentionally, entombing whatever machinery or prototypes lay inside. And that is where the mystery deepens. What exactly was hidden down there? Mainstream historians suggest unfinished rocket systems, experimental aircraft, perhaps early radar or guidance technology. Projects rushed, under-resourced, and ultimately overtaken by events. Yet other theories persist. Some researchers argue that attempts were made to develop weapons based on unconventional science, electromagnetic propulsion, energy-focused devices, even precursors to modern stealth technology. Not proven, not dismissed, simply unresolved. Supported by obscure lab notes, intercepted correspondence, and the testimony of engineers whose post-war careers quietly advanced in aerospace and research institutions around the world. Then there are stranger claims, stories of circular craft, gravity experiments, or mysterious reactors whose purpose remains unclear. Claims hovering between fringe speculation and historical curiosity. They sit in archives beside documented breakthroughs in rocketry and jet propulsion, facts and theories side by side, separated only by the absence of complete evidence. Occasionally, excavation teams uncover pieces of heavy equipment buried in unexpected places. Reinforced steel plating unlike standard wartime construction. Ventilation shafts leading nowhere. And once in a while, sealed chambers become exposed due to erosion or construction, revealing empty rooms as though something had once been removed. Removed by whom? And when? Some suggest Allied intelligence teams recovered advanced prototypes in the immediate aftermath of the war. Others believe certain devices were relocated by fleeing officials, hidden in remote forests or deep lakes as part of secret evacuation operations. A few point to post-war technological leaps in rocketry, aircraft design, military propulsion, and wonder whether they began not in open laboratories but in abandoned tunnels beneath collapsing regimes. We may never know. For now, these forests remain quiet. The mountains sit undisturbed. And deep underground, sealed doorways rest behind walls of rock, their contents, if any, locked away from time and inquiry. History gives us blueprints, orders, a handful of photographs. It gives us ruins and silence, but it also leaves space for questions. How much of the Nazi secret weapons program truly reached operational form? How much was destroyed? And, most unsettling of all, how much might still lie buried in forgotten caverns, untouched since the final days of the war? In a world where technology advances faster than ever, the past still holds machines we can only imagine, and doors we have not yet opened. What waits behind them, concealed in darkness and dust, remains one of the most enduring mysteries of the conflict, and a reminder that even in defeat, some secrets choose to remain underground. From vast bunkers and sealed tunnels, where echoes of forgotten weapons still seem to linger, we step now into a quieter realm of loss and longing. A realm not of steel and engines, but of canvas, marble, and gold leaf, where creativity once flourished, then was silenced, seized, scattered, and in many cases, never seen again. Picture a dim archive room deep beneath a European museum. Concrete walls, thick and cold. Narrow shelves lined with handwritten catalog cards. The air smells of dust and time. A single lamp flickers over a desk where a curator turns pages listing masterpieces. Rembrandt portraits, Raphael altarpieces, priceless works by Klimt, Van Eyck, and countless others. Beside some entries, a small mark, retrieved, identified, returned, and beside many more, nothing. No location, no fate, just absence. Because as the Nazi regime tore across Europe, it did not only seize land and lives, it seized culture. A systematic effort unfolded, led by special units, backed by scholars and officials, to locate, catalog, and appropriate the artistic heritage of entire nations. Galleries were emptied, libraries stripped, private collections dismantled. In some cases, masterpieces were selected for Hitler's planned Führermuseum in Linz. Others were destined for senior officials or for ideological destruction. Then came 1945. Retreat, collapse, panic. and with it, the disappearance of thousands of artworks, paintings, sculptures, tapestries, manuscripts, jewels, worth tens of billions by modern standards, but beyond monetary value in cultural significance. Some pieces were burned as Allied troops advanced. Others were hidden and later recovered in salt mines and alpine bunkers. But not all. Not nearly all. Scattered testimonies from soldiers, museum officials, and local residents describe convoys seen traveling into forests in the war's final days. Trucks covered in canvas, guards posted at mountain tunnels, boxes sealed with wax and stamped with the imperial eagle. And thereafter, silence. In Poland, Hungary, France, Belgium, Greece, families still hold faded photographs of paintings taken from their walls. Museums maintain empty frames as memorials. Each missing piece represents not only a theft, but an effort to erase identity, heritage, and memory. And yet, hope persists. From time to time, one of these long-lost treasures resurfaces. A drawing discovered in a dusty folder, a Renaissance portrait found behind a false wall, an exquisite sculpture recognized at a distant auction and quietly reclaimed. Each recovery stirs new questions. If one survived, how many more? And where might they be? Some theories follow practical lines, hidden in private vaults, passed quietly through collector networks, stored in bank boxes whose owners never returned. Others imagine forgotten bunkers beneath Central European mountains, their entrances sealed and overgrown, crates untouched since the war's end. Then there are stranger stories of divers searching deep lakes where crates were said to have been thrown, weighted down in desperation, of remote monasteries whispered to have safeguarded works for decades, awaiting rightful heirs, of coded wartime maps hinting at caches buried beneath rural estates or forest clearings. Most remain unverified, but none are impossible. The monuments men recovered astonishing troves in places long thought empty. And even today, archivists and investigators trace faint clues through correspondence, shipping logs, wartime photographs, and testimony of aging witnesses who recall strange movements of art convoys or secretive SS detachments in the war's closing months. Some researchers believe much of the missing art was destroyed, burned, bombed, or lost to chaos. But others suggest that the very scale of looting and the meticulous documentation that preceded it implies a plan. An intention not merely to steal, but to preserve for a future that never arrived. If so, then where are these treasures now? In locked private salons in South America, rumored to hold old masters with uncertain provenance? In Central Europe's still undiscovered tunnels and bunkers? Or perhaps sealed in chests beneath alpine lakes, waiting for silt to shift, or a diver's light to reveal their resting place? Today, international teams continue the search. Museums conduct provenance research with ever greater rigor. Archivists scan fragile Nazi inventories, hoping a forgotten reference number or misfiled report will unlock a trail. Families still write letters, submit claims, and hope. And somewhere, perhaps in the hush of a cellar or the shadowed heart of a mountain, crates lie unopened, wood aging, ropes fraying, but contents preserved, brushstrokes frozen in darkness, captured light waiting to return to the world. How many masterpieces remain hidden? How many nations still wait for pieces of their soul to come home? Their soul. And when one day a sealed chamber is finally opened, what stories and what wounds will emerge with the art inside? For now, the silence endures. Paintings lost in war, suspended between memory and myth. And the greatest gallery never seen remains a mystery, still waiting in the dark. And from lost art, locked in silent vaults of memory, we journey now far from Europe, beyond the reach of museums, archives, and buried bunkers. We travel to a place where nature reigns untouched, where snow and ice stretch to the horizon like a frozen eternity. A land so remote, so harsh, that secrets could lie beneath its surface for generations, undisturbed by time or human curiosity. Antarctica. Imagine it. Endless white plains under a sky of pale steel. Winds howl across empty ridges, sculpting ice into jagged spires and sweeping dunes. The sea crashes against sheer cliffs of ice, while beneath the crystalline surface, ancient glaciers move silently, slow, patient, relentless. It is a continent that seems almost alien, a frozen world at the edge of human imagination. And somewhere within this vast, icy wilderness, a question lingers, one that has captivated historians, adventurers, and conspiracy theorists alike. Did the Nazis build a secret base here? The idea stems from documented history. In the late 1930s, before the world descended into global conflict, Germany launched an Antarctic expedition. The mission, led by Captain Alfred Richer, traveled aboard the ship Schwabenland. Using specially equipped aircraft, the team photographed thousands of square miles and planted flags across a region that would come to be known as Neuschwabenland. Officially, the purpose was economic, securing whaling grounds and exploring resources. Yet, questions remain. Why invest such effort in a frozen frontier? What strategic ambitions lay behind this sudden interest? Some historians point to ideology. Nazi leadership was fascinated by ancient origins, mythical homelands, and the possibility of hidden domains untouched by modern powers. Antarctica, mysterious and pristine, fit their curiosity. At the very least, they surveyed and mapped the land. That much is undisputed. But according to more speculative narratives, the story did not end with maps and photographs. Rumors claim that as the Third Reich crumbled, elite units fled south, taking scientists, advanced technology, and even secret weapons programs with them. Submarines observed heading toward the icy South Atlantic, supply ships disappearing without trace, and references in post-war military intelligence hinting at unusual activity in remote southern waters. Some suggest a hidden fortress carved beneath the ice, complete with laboratories, bunkers, and hangars. A sanctuary where a defeated regime could regroup, experiment, and wait for a future rise. Others go further still, whispering of strange technology, occult research, or encounters with phenomena beyond known science. Then there is Operation High Jump. In 1946, less than a year after World War II ended, the United States dispatched one of the largest Antarctic expeditions in history, led by Rear Admiral Richard Byrd. Officially, it was a training and research mission. Yet its scale, 13 ships, thousands of personnel, and military aircraft, raised questions. Why such force for exploration? And why did the mission end abruptly, months ahead of schedule? Byrd later made cryptic remarks about threats that could fly from pole to pole with incredible speed, fueling speculation. Were his warnings misunderstood, misquoted, or were they hints of something he witnessed on the ice? Mainstream scholars point to simpler explanations. Strategic interests, Cold War maneuvers, a continent rich in untapped resources and scientific value, extreme weather forcing an early retreat, and indeed, no verified evidence has surfaced of a Nazi base beneath Antarctic snow. Yet the idea persists. In old cartographic archives, strange notations and symbols appear in high-latitude regions. In declassified documents, vague references to southern operations still spark debate. Modern satellite imagery occasionally reveals geometric shapes under the ice, glitches, shadows, or something more. A continent so vast, so unexplored, could hold many secrets. Beneath ice layers miles thick lie subglacial lakes, hidden mountains, and cavern systems warmed by geothermal vents, natural formations, or potential hiding places. Even today, access is limited. Harsh storms, long months of darkness, and strict international treaties ensure that much of Antarctica remains untouched by human presence. And in the quiet isolation of that frozen land, imagination fills the void left by silence and ice. Was New Schwabenland nothing more than a fleeting geopolitical ambition? A footnote in the era of polar exploration? Or could fragments of a forgotten outpost still lie buried deep beneath the snow, machinery preserved by cold, waiting for discovery? In a world where entire cities have vanished under jungle and sand, is it impossible to imagine structures hidden beneath layers of ice? Some mysteries feel born of fear and fantasy. Others endure because they touch something deeper, our sense that history still has corners left unexplored, stories waiting beyond the horizon of certainty. And as the Antarctic wind sweeps across an endless sea of white, one question remains suspended in the frozen air. What, if anything, sleeps beneath the ice? And from the frozen silence of Antarctica, where ice guards secrets as old as the planet itself, our journey shifts north, toward lands far warmer, lush with life and shadows. If the polar wastes offered a refuge for myth, then here, in the emerald wilderness of South America, whispers turn into footsteps, and footsteps into trails that investigators have followed for decades. Dense rainforest stretches beyond the horizon, its canopy rolling like a living ocean of green. Mist clings to the treetops at dawn, curling through ancient trunks and dripping into rivers that wind like silver threads through untamed earth. Somewhere beneath those leaves lie forgotten villages, remote settlements, and structures that seem to echo another world entirely, Europe transported brick by brick into the tropics. And within this backdrop, a question lingers. Did high-ranking Nazis escape here and build new lives under new names? We begin with established history. As the Third Reich collapsed, thousands of officials and collaborators fled across Europe, slipping through underground routes later known as ratlines. Many passed through Italy, aided by sympathetic clergy, fake passports, and intelligence networks fractured by the war's end. Their final destination? Often the southern half of the Western Hemisphere. Argentina, under Juan Perón, openly accepted German immigrants, some driven by ideology, others by geopolitics, economics, or ambition. Records confirm that former SS officers and Nazi supporters settled in Buenos Aires, Bariloche, and rural mountain towns. Streets lined with Alpine-style chalets, German-language schools, Oktoberfest celebrations in the middle of the Andes. But alongside public communities existed quieter arrivals, individuals who appeared suddenly with wealth, connections, and a fierce desire for anonymity. Among them, notorious names emerged. Adolf Eichmann, captured near Buenos Aires in 1960. Joseph Mengele, eluding justice for decades as he moved between Paraguay and Brazil. Those are documented facts. Yet they form only one layer of this story, because beyond the known fugitives lies a deeper, unresolved mystery. How many escaped? And were some aided by powerful networks that continued long after Berlin fell? In the jungles of Paraguay, villagers tell stories of foreigners who arrived in the late 1940s, stern men who spoke little, carried weapons, and built guarded compounds far from prying eyes. In southern Chile, remote valleys shelter secluded German colonies, where legends speak of hidden tunnels, forbidden rooms, and strange research conducted behind closed doors. And then there is Colonia Dignidad, a secretive settlement in Chile founded in the 1960s by Paul Schaefer, a former Nazi medic. Officially a religious commune, in reality a brutal enclave tied to torture, weapons trafficking, and collaboration with regional intelligence services. Beneath the idyllic surface, whitewashed houses, neat gardens, and an eerie imitation of rural Bavaria lay a darker world where secrets were protected with silence and force. Investigators later uncovered tunnels, surveillance systems, and records hinting at international networks. For many, the colony seemed less a community than a fortress, one that felt disturbingly like a continuation of an old ideology in a new land. Yet Chile and Argentina are only part of the puzzle. In Brazil, rumors persist of ranches where German-speaking settlers arrived with unexpected wealth. In Bolivia, old photographs surface of European men in military boots, posing beside airstrips hacked out of wilderness. And in Paraguay, isolated estancias dot the countryside, shielded by thick vegetation and generations of secrecy. Are these coincidences, remnants of immigration waves, cultural enclaves, and diaspora communities? Or fragments of a larger, coordinated escape? Intelligence archives add further intrigue. Post-war files reference clandestine flight routes. Bank documents hint at transferred assets, gold, and valuables never recovered in Europe. Some declassified reports even suggest that Western intelligence agencies, focused on the emerging Cold War, turned a blind eye, seeing in these same fugitives tools against communism rather than criminals on the run. Then there are the stories whispered by locals of German submarines seen off the Patagonian coast in 1945, of aircraft landing on hidden runways deep in the jungle, of entire families adopting new identities overnight, papers burned, accents softened, pasts erased. And, perhaps the most unsettling question of all, did some who escaped continue their work, scientific, ideological, or otherwise, under new governments and sponsors? We tread carefully here, not to sensationalize, but to observe how history sometimes blurs into mystery. Because while many claims fade under scrutiny, others remain stubbornly unresolved. Some archives are still classified, some graves unmarked, some voices silenced. In a continent as vast and varied as South America, it is easy to hide, easier still to be forgotten. Yet the jungle does not forget, and the mountains do not. They stand silent, their slopes dotted with foreign roofs, their valleys echoing languages brought from far across the ocean. Everyday life unfolds, markets, children playing, church bells ringing, but beneath normalcy lies an undercurrent of unanswered questions. How many footprints from Europe's darkest chapter were left in this soil? How many secrets slipped quietly across the Atlantic, never to return? And in remote towns that still celebrate customs from a homeland left behind long ago, are they merely preserving culture or guarding history? For now, the forests keep their silence, and we are left to wonder, in the heart of South America, how much of the past remains hidden in plain sight. And from the hidden enclaves of South America, where shadows of the past blend with jungle mist, our journey turns back toward the centers of power, to a story not of fleeing fugitives, but of deliberate selection, quiet agreements, and secrets signed in ink and buried beneath layers of official history. We arrive at the windswept plains of the American Southwest. White sand stretches for miles beneath a cloudless sky, shimmering beneath relentless sun. Concrete bunkers rise from the desert floor, quiet and cold. Inside, laboratories hum, chalkboards fill with equations that could reshape the world, and rockets rest on launch pads like sleeping giants, silent now, but poised to pierce the heavens. This is the birthplace of the modern space age, and within its foundations lies a secret born from the darkest chapter of the 20th century, Operation Paperclip. At the end of World War II, as the ruins of Europe smoldered and the world struggled to comprehend the scale of destruction, another conflict was already forming, one fought not with tanks but with intelligence, science, and speed. The Cold War dawned, and suddenly, minds became weapons. The United States and the Soviet Union raced not only for territory, but for talent. Both sides knew Germany had invested heavily in advanced research: rocketry, aeronautics, medicine, chemical engineering. Among these programs was the V-2 rocket, a weapon that rained terror on London and Antwerp, yet represented a technological leap unmatched at the time. American intelligence saw an opportunity and made a choice. Operation Paperclip was authorized to recruit German scientists, engineers, and specialists. Many were former members of the Nazi regime. Some held ranks in the SS, designed weapons used against civilians, or conducted research under conditions forever stained by moral horror. Yet instead of standing trial, they were quietly transported to Amerika, given new identities, and placed in laboratories and military facilities. Officially, the mission was pragmatic: prevent Soviet acquisition, advance U.S. research, and secure national defense. Uncomfortable truths were redacted, sanitized, or simply ignored. One of the most famous recruits was Wernher von Braun, the brilliant rocket engineer whose designs powered the V-2. Later, in the open light of American achievement, he became a leading figure in NASA, guiding humanity toward the moon. Photographs show him smiling beside American flags, surrounded by engineers and astronauts. But archival images tell another story: von Braun in uniform, standing beside military officials of a fallen regime. Beneath the triumph of the Apollo program lies a more complicated legacy, one that forces us to ask how far nations will go in pursuit of power, progress, and security. And von Braun was far from alone. Medical researchers whose experiments during the war remain a source of deep horror found new laboratories. Chemists linked to wartime weapons programs joined U.S. intelligence and defense agencies. Intelligence officers with knowledge of underground networks were quietly absorbed into post-war strategy. Many files remain partially redacted, names obscured, assignments erased. Even now, new documents occasionally surface, revealing additional participants or detailing negotiations once hidden from public view. Each revelation widens the shadow the program casts. Critics argue that morality was sacrificed to fear, that justice bowed to strategic calculation. Others insist the program altered the course of history, enabling breakthroughs that pushed humanity beyond Earth's atmosphere. And then there are the speculative whispers. Did some of these scientists continue experiments based on wartime theories? Were unusual research projects, later dismissed or buried, pursued under the banner of national security? Do classified archives still conceal proposals, prototypes, or research lines born in that era? While mainstream historians emphasize known achievements and documented ethical compromises, more fringe voices suggest a deeper story. Projects moving beyond conventional science into realms of propulsion, energy, or even consciousness that parallel rumors surrounding Nazi programs in Europe. No firm evidence confirms such claims, yet the secrecy surrounding Paperclip, the destruction of records, and the layers of classification invite speculation. When history closes its doors, imagination steps forward. Because here lies the quiet tension at the heart of Operation Paperclip. Did this effort simply accelerate science and spaceflight, or did it blur the moral boundaries of a free society? In saving knowledge from a fallen regime, did the victors inherit something more elusive? An echo of ideology or a willingness to compromise ethical lines for technological gain? Today, rockets still launch from the same deserts where those early engineers walked. Satellites circle above us, and spacecraft drift into the outer darkness, carrying with them the legacy of choices made in war's aftermath. And as we look up at the night sky, at the streak of flame from a rocket rising into the stars, we are left with a lingering question. How much of our modern world was built not only on innovation and vision, but on secrets quietly carried across oceans, sealed in documents, stamped with new identities, and buried in the archives of nations determined to win the future at any cost? Some stories are celebrated in textbooks. Others whisper from sealed files and forgotten corridors. Operation Paperclip lies somewhere in between, half in light, half in shadow, and perhaps in those shadows more remains yet unseen. And if Operation Paperclip revealed the quiet deals struck in boardrooms and laboratories, our path now turns to a far darker frontier, one not sanctioned openly, but whispered through corridors of power, concealed behind false identities, forged passports, and silent passage across borders. Far from the deserts of New Mexico, we begin in a very different place. In the heart of Rome, the morning sun spills over ancient stone. Narrow streets wind past silent monasteries, their walls thick with centuries of secrets. Church bells toll softly in the distance, echoing through courtyards where ivy climbs weathered brick. In the dim light of a secluded office, drawers once slid open to reveal travel documents, baptism records, and letters stamped with official seals, papers that could transform a hunted man into a ghost reborn. Here, and in safe houses across Europe, a hidden network took shape in the war's aftermath. A network meant to disappear people. This was the world of the Nazi ratlines. As Germany collapsed and Allied forces pressed inward, thousands of high-ranking officers, SS members, collaborators, and key personnel faced a reckoning. Nuremberg loomed. War crimes tribunals prepared. The world demanded accountability. And yet, many escaped. The term rat line came to describe the secret escape routes used by fleeing Nazis and fascist collaborators. These pathways led from Europe to destinations in South America, the Middle East, and elsewhere. Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and further east, places where shifting alliances and emerging geopolitical tensions offered fresh refuge. How did they vanish so effectively? The verified history shows a labyrinth of forged documents, sympathetic intermediaries, and exploitation of refugee channels. Some assistance came from individuals within institutions not fully aware of who they were aiding. Others, perhaps, acted with clearer intent. Passports issued under assumed names. Ship tickets purchased through charitable funds meant for real war victims. Safe houses in Austria and Italy where fugitives waited in silence for the right moment to move. One famous route wound through monasteries in northern Italy to the port of Genoa, where ships sailed toward Buenos Aires. Another passed through Spain to the Canary Islands, en route to South America. Some traveled through Syrian and Egyptian ports, joining military and intelligence apparatuses in those lands. And, in rare cases, individuals slipped even further, into the tangled currents of political power in Palestine. Not all who traveled these paths were war criminals, but many were. Some became advisors to governments. Some changed their names, lived quietly, raised families. Others stepped back into roles of influence, power, or violence. Official accounts describe a chaotic post-war period, overwhelmed agencies, and gaps in administration. Allies focused on larger geopolitical concerns as the Cold War tension sharpened. And in that turning moment, priorities shifted. As intelligence agencies competed for knowledge and influence, certain figures gained unexpected value. A simple question lingers. Were these escapes merely failures of control in a time of global upheaval? Or was there, beneath the surface, tacit permission, even strategic support? Mainstream historians lean toward bureaucratic disorder, opportunistic networks, and isolated complicity. But there are darker whispers at the fringe. Whispers suggesting organized protection by intelligence services, secret agreements to secure scientific or strategic expertise, and coordinated transport funded through hidden wartime assets. Some point to unexplained financial trails, gold shipments, and corporate connections stretching across continents. There are claims, unproven yet persistent, that certain ratlines did not end in quiet coastal towns or remote ranches, but in secure compounds, clandestine research facilities, or paramilitary enclaves. That some figures continued covert operations, shaping conflicts far from Europe. These ideas drift between speculation and shadowy fragments of archival evidence, never fully confirmed, never entirely dismissed. Even today, sealed files remain. Accounts surface, are contested, fade again into uncertainty. Occasionally, a quiet village in Argentina or a remote valley in Chile reveals a photograph, a rumor, a memory of a man with an accent and a past no one dared question, a name forgotten or deliberately erased. The stones of Rome still stand. The monasteries remain quiet, as they have for centuries. Ships still cross the same seas once used by men who sought a second life. And in that silence, one cannot help but wonder how much of this network has truly been uncovered, and how much lies hidden beneath layers of political necessity, unmarked graves, and false identities. When pursuit gives way to secrecy, when justice and power collide, and when history leaves gaps large enough for ghosts to pass through, what truths remain buried? And what names still sleep behind locked drawers and sealed archives, waiting for a history that has yet to be fully written? And from the shadowed escape routes that ferried men toward forgotten lives, we shift now to another hidden frontier of the Third Reich. One not defined by movement across borders, but by a race toward an incomprehensible power. A power forged not in secrecy of passports and disguises, but in laboratories, caverns, and the quiet hum of experimental machinery. Deep beneath the rolling hills of southern Germany, there lies a quiet valley where wind sweeps through pine forests and mist clings to damp stone. Today, hikers pass along narrow trails, unaware of the silent chambers that once lay beneath their feet. Sealed rooms, reinforced tunnels, and cryptic remnants of research meant to alter the course of history. Concrete foundations peek through moss, ventilation shafts rust in the underbrush, and strange metal fittings stud the earth like the remains of some industrial skeleton. Here, among these relics of forgotten ambition, researchers once chased the atom. This was the world of Nazi nuclear research, an effort shadowed by ambition, constrained by chaos, and forever wrapped in questions. The story begins with a breakthrough. In 1938, German scientists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann discovered nuclear fission, revealing the unimaginable possibility of splitting the atom. The theoretical implications soon reached the highest ranks of leadership. A scientific arms race began, one that would ultimately shape the modern world. Yet unlike the highly organized Manhattan Project across the Atlantic, Nazi Germany's uranium effort unfolded in fragmented laboratories and competing initiatives. Historians agree that the German nuclear program struggled with divided leadership, scarce resources, and internal rivalries. Critical figures like Werner Heisenberg debated the feasibility of a bomb. Others pushed for nuclear reactors as potential energy sources. Bureaucratic infighting slowed progress. Allied bombings disrupted infrastructure. The war's desperate final years scattered genius across a collapsing regime. And yet, questions persist. If their efforts were disorganized, how close did they truly come? Why do certain documents remain classified? And what of the strange remnants found in forests, mines, and salt caves? We know that uranium oxide was processed, that heavy water was sought aggressively from Norway, and that experimental reactor cores were assembled and dismantled before Allied forces arrived. We know that uranium was shipped, stored, and sometimes vanished. We know that American forces secured barrels of enriched uranium at the war's end, material later fed into the Manhattan Project. Then there are stranger details, pieces of evidence whispered rather than shouted. Allegations of clandestine test sites in Thuringia, reports of underground facilities whose full purpose has never been confirmed, local accounts from the war's final days claiming strange lights in the night sky, shockwaves felt without explanation, and sudden evacuations enforced by elite SS guards. Were these coincidences born from confusion in a collapsing regime, or fragments of something more experimental, more urgent, more dangerous? Some suggest the Nazis pursued a different kind of nuclear device, not a full atomic bomb, but a radiological weapon, a dirty bomb designed to spread deadly material without requiring the full complexity of the Manhattan design. Others speculate that a crude nuclear test may have been attempted in remote valleys, based on scattered testimonies and post-war soil analyses, whose interpretations remain fiercely debated. And then there is the uranium itself, tracked in some cases, missing in others. Where did every shipment go? Was every barrel accounted for at war's end? Or did some vanish into private hands, foreign vaults, or secret programs? Mainstream scholarship largely maintains that Germany never approached a functional nuclear weapon. The technological gap, the lack of unified leadership, and the late war turmoil created insurmountable barriers. Yet the absence of certainty leaves a space for quiet speculation. Across Europe, sealed bunkers still lie unexplored. Records remain redacted. Witnesses have passed away, taking fragments of truth with them. In the silence of those underground chambers, one can almost imagine the low hum of machinery sparking to life, the metallic clink of tools, the tension in every experiment undertaken at the edge of the unknown. Science, ambition, and desperation converging, driven by a regime willing to reshape the world at any cost. And so the question lingers. In the race for the atom, did Nazi Germany merely stumble in disarray? Or did pieces of their nuclear vision survive, hidden in forgotten vaults, scattered across oceans, or absorbed quietly into post-war power? The earth beneath southern Germany keeps its secrets well, and until every archive opens, every tunnel is explored, and every fragment of uranium is fully traced, the full truth of the Nazi atomic pursuit may remain just beyond our grasp, waiting in the cold darkness where ambition once burned. And from the laboratories where atom-splitting dreams flickered in the final days of war, we turn to a very different frontier of Nazi ambition, one not rooted in machinery or uranium, but in ancient myths, forgotten civilizations, and the unsettling belief that the past could unlock a new future. High in the windswept passages of the Himalayas, prayer flags flutter against raw stone. Snow swirls through silent valleys, and the thin mountain air carries only the low hum of distant wind. To most, this landscape is a place of spirituality and isolation, remote, timeless, untouched. Yet, decades ago, strangers in crisp uniforms, armed with scientific instruments and occult convictions, once walked here with determination and purpose. These were members of the Ahnenerbe, a secretive Nazi organization founded to study what they believed were the ancient roots of an Aryan past. Their mission stretched far beyond traditional archaeology or anthropology. It was not simply history they pursued, but proof, evidence to support a sweeping ideological vision, and perhaps something older, stranger, and far more mystical. To understand their motives is to step into a landscape where scholarship blurred with myth, where folklore was treated like roadmap, and where ancient stone relics were examined not only with rulers and notebooks, but with a hunger for revelation. The mainstream record confirms many expeditions to Tibet, Scandinavia, Greece, the Andes, and North Africa. Teams measured skulls, cataloged runes, gathered manuscripts, and studied religious texts. They sought connections to ancient Indo-European peoples, convinced that lost clues to racial destiny were scattered across the world. Some searched for the origins of languages and symbols. Others collected relics, bones, or cultural artifacts. At first glance, it appears as a pseudo-scientific effort wrapped in political ambition, a mission designed to sculpt history into shape that suited the regime. And yet, some expeditions drifted into territory that defies simple categorization. Why did researchers carry strange measuring devices whose function remains debated? Why were certain reports classified, their contents never fully disclosed? Why did some members speak not only of archaeology, but of hidden knowledge, forgotten technologies, and ancient powers? There are whispers of Tibetan monks shown unfamiliar symbols, of manuscripts copied in secret, of caves visited under cover of darkness. Rumors linger that these teams sought more than cultural validation, that they searched for occult traditions, esoteric rituals, even remnants of civilizations lost to recorded history. Was it desperation, superstition, or genuine curiosity that led highly educated men to chase legends once considered mere folklore? Some fringe theories claim they sought traces of Atlantis, relics tied to ancient sun cults, or artifacts capable of granting mystical insight. Others point to the strange overlap between Ahnenerbe interests and global myths, stories of subterranean realms, vanished cultures, or sacred knowledge hidden from ordinary eyes. Mainstream historians largely dismiss such ideas as fanciful projections, layered atop an already disturbing historical truth. Most scholars argue that the Ahnenerbe's supernatural pursuits were unscientific ideology, amplified by post-war imagination. And yet, certain facts refuse to settle neatly. Several archives remain partially sealed. Artifacts cataloged in expedition records have never been found. Witness accounts describe research into runic energy, geomantic grid lines, and forgotten temple sites. Coded documents reference hidden paths and ancient centers of power, phrases open to endless interpretation. If their findings were meaningless, why were so many files seized, scattered, and in some cases reportedly destroyed? If their work was purely symbolic, why expend such resources at a time when war consumed the continent? Even today, mountaineers in Tibet tell stories of mysterious tools discovered in caves, and villagers in remote Himalayan valleys speak of Europeans appearing suddenly during those turbulent years, then vanishing as quietly as they came. Archaeologists occasionally uncover Ahnenerbe insignia in unexpected places, stirring debates that rarely find resolution. Were these expeditions a misguided academic program or something deeper, a quest fueled by ideological fervor and the belief that ancient knowledge could shape a modern empire? Or perhaps the truth lies somewhere between, a strange blend of myth and method, science and superstition, ambition and fear. Whatever their goals, the silence surrounding certain discoveries remains unsettling. And so the question lingers in those snow-swept passes and forgotten archives. Did the Ahnenerbe simply chase illusions through ancient lands, or did they uncover fragments of a past too inconvenient, too uncanny, or too powerful ever to be revealed? In the quiet of the mountains, where wind still whispers along stone, the mystery endures, waiting, like so many secrets of the Third Reich, in the thin space between documented history and the shadows that lie just beyond it. And from the high plateaus of Tibet and the arcane ambitions of the Ahnenerbe, we return now to the forests of Eastern Europe, back to a place where power once moved in whispers behind thick concrete and camouflaged bunkers. A place where the war's turning points were plotted, and where loyalty and betrayal collided in lethal silence. Deep in the dense woodlands of northeastern Poland, morning fog curls around moss-covered ruins. Towering pines stand like silent sentinels, their trunks rising through a chill mist that clings to the earth. Amid these trees, concrete blocks lie shattered, twisted by explosives and time. Rusted steel doors gape open like mouths frozen in shock. It is a place both eerily quiet and heavy with echoes. The Wolf's Lair, Adolf Hitler's eastern headquarters during World War II. But amidst its decaying bunkers and broken corridors, another mystery lurks. A discovery that surfaced long after the war ended. Bones, human remains, buried deep near the compound. Skeletons hidden beneath the soil, emerging decades later without names, uniforms, or clear explanation. Who were they? Victims of execution? Secret personnel who vanished without record? Or something even stranger? To set the stage, the Wolf's Lair was more than a military base. It was a fortified city in the wilderness, protected by minefields, anti-aircraft guns, and rings of barbed wire. Thousands lived and worked here. High-ranking officials came and went under heavy guard. The 1944 assassination attempt against Hitler unfolded on this ground, shaking its foundation, literally and historically. And when the Nazi leadership finally retreated in early 1945, they detonated the complex, hoping to erase evidence of its operations. Yet destruction brought no clarity. Instead, it left shadows and questions. Decades later, hikers and archaeologists exploring the grounds unearthed skeletal remains, sometimes single bones, sometimes entire bodies, hidden in shallow pits. Forensic study suggested some belonged to soldiers, others may have been prisoners. But then there were cases that raised further uncertainty, bones showing no obvious military context, remains lacking identification marks, even individuals whose age or condition did not match known personnel records. The official explanation is cautious. These are wartime casualties, likely killed during operations or retreat. In a region ravaged by violence, unmarked graves are tragically common, and yet not all evidence aligns neatly. Why were some skeletons buried unusually close to command structures, areas normally secure and monitored? Why were some remains found with unusual binding marks, hinting at potential execution or interrogation? And why did certain discoveries coincide with rumors long whispered by locals? For years, nearby villagers have spoken of people brought into the forest at night, civilian laborers, political prisoners, unwilling participants in secret operations. Some stories mention SS patrols guarding secluded clearings. Others recall trucks arriving under cover of darkness, leaving without explanation. Folk memory can distort over time, yet often contains kernels of truth shaped by fear and trauma. More speculative theories point to the darker side of Nazi internal politics. Some wonder whether the remains could belong to those purged quietly, individuals who learned too much, officers suspected of disloyalty, or members of the resistance captured near the compound. It is known that interrogations took place here. Files document executions following the failed assassination plot. But were all such acts recorded? Or did some disappear along with the victims themselves? Then there are fringe notions. Claims that researchers or special project workers were eliminated to protect secrets in the final days as the Red Army advanced. These ideas stretch beyond established evidence, and historians approach them carefully. Yet there remains an uncomfortable truth. The Wolf's Lair was a place where control and paranoia governed decisions. Silence was often enforced. Records were sometimes erased. Which leads to a more unsettling question. How much about this site was intentionally buried, literally and historically? In these quiet woods, every rustle of leaves and distant bird call seems to underscore the absence of answers. The soil, scarred by mines and explosions, still conceals fragments of the past. The ruins, half swallowed by moss and earth, stand like mausoleums to unfinished stories. Visitors today walk paths once patrolled by armed guards. They step past foundations that housed military planners and SS officers. And somewhere beneath their feet lie bones whose stories remain unknown. Brief reminders that even among recorded events, there are chapters not fully told. Were the skeletons simply casualties of a collapsing war machine? Were they victims of secret executions? Or were they part of something far more hidden? Operations erased before retreat, leaving only silent remains in the forest floor? As mist drifts once more between the trees, the question lingers in the cold morning air. What else lies beneath this ground, waiting to be uncovered? And what truths would it reveal if found? Some mysteries whisper from mountain peaks. Others, like this one, sleep beneath the roots of ancient pines, unseen but never fully forgotten. And from the silent remains hidden beneath the pines of the wolf's lair, our path now turns upward, toward shadows cast not on the forest floor, but across the sky itself. For while some mysteries lie buried in soil, others hover in the space between technology and legend, between wartime ambition and whispered impossibility. On a quiet alpine plateau in southern Germany, the wind sweeps across abandoned concrete foundations. Moss grows thick over crumbled test stands. A rusted rail track leads nowhere, vanishing into underbrush. The mountains watch in silence, as if guarding memories no one can fully prove or deny. Here, in sites once controlled by the Third Reich's secret weapons programs, a legend was born, one that suggests the Nazis may have reached beyond conventional engineering toward craft unlike anything seen before. The term most often associated with these claims is Haunebu, a name rooted in obscure wartime references and post-war testimony. According to these stories, German scientists pursued circular, disc-shaped aircraft designed to lift vertically, travel at astonishing speed, and maneuver with a precision that defied known aerodynamics. Diagrams purporting to show sleek metallic discs, engine cores labeled anti-gravity drives, and wartime blueprints spread through archives and collectors' circles, inviting questions as strange as they are persistent. What exactly did the Nazis attempt in their pursuit of advanced flight? And why do so many accounts, both credible and speculative, continue to intersect around this idea? Documented history confirms that Germany invested heavily in cutting-edge aerospace technology. The jet-powered Me-262 flew years ahead of its time. The rocket program at Peenemünde produced the V-2, the world's first long-range ballistic missile. Experimental vertical takeoff prototypes, unusual wing designs, and plans for long-range bombers were all pursued with remarkable urgency. In that context, the leap from documented experimentation to rumored saucer-shaped craft feels less like pure fantasy and more like a boundary blurred by secrecy, incomplete archives, and the feverish ambitions of a regime facing defeat. Eyewitness claims from Allied pilots during the war described glowing Foo Fighters dancing beside bombers, objects maneuvering in ways familiar aircraft could not. Military intelligence reports logged sightings without explanation. Some accounts blamed experimental German weapons. Others suggested weather phenomena or even psychological stress under combat conditions. Still, the sightings persist in historical records, stubborn and unresolved. After the war, a new layer of mystery emerged. Former scientists and intelligence officers hinted, carefully, at projects buried inside black-budget research, separate from the known rocket program. Certain figures connected to secret SS research divisions were detained and questioned. Some documents surfaced, then disappeared into sealed archives. And in the years that followed, photographs began to appear. Grainy images of circular craft, often dismissed as hoaxes, yet haunting in their ambiguity. Could these so-called Haunebu craft have been advanced prototypes, never completed but tested in early forms? Or are they the product of myth-making, fueled by the shocking technological leaps Germany did achieve? Facts blur with speculation at the edges. Some fringe narratives claim anti-gravity experiments, drawing tenuous threads between SSS occult research, clandestine engineering teams, and exotic theoretical physics. Others extend the mystery further still, suggesting possible post-war continuation in hidden facilities or among scientists who escaped through clandestine networks to South America. Mainstream historians, grounded in available evidence, argue no definitive proof exists for functional disk craft. They point to forged documents, exaggerated post-war accounts, and the distortion that accompanies enormous wartime secrets mixed with modern fascination. Yet even they acknowledge something interesting. Gaps remain. Many archives were destroyed or sealed. Some programs, particularly those connected to secret SS research, left only fragments. And perhaps most telling, advanced disc-shaped aircraft did enter development in several countries after the war, including projects in the United States and Soviet Union that explored circular lifting bodies, magnetic propulsion concepts, and unconventional flight dynamics. Was this purely independent innovation? Or did knowledge, ideas, even fragments of engineering travel with scientists who crossed borders when the Reich fell? The mountains here offer no answers. They stand unmoved, watching clouds shift across the sky where, according to rumor, strange craft once rose before disappearing into secrecy. The wind moves through broken concrete chambers once shielded from curious eyes, now open and quiet. Now, if nothing extraordinary happened here, the questions remain. Why do stories endure? Why do documents, authentic or not, keep resurfacing? Why do wartime accounts of unusual aerial encounters persist without clear resolution? And if something did happen, if even one test flight came closer to success than history admits, what became of that knowledge when the war ended? Who carried it forward? Where might it have led? In the end, truth sits somewhere in the space between ambition and rumor, buried in fragmentary archives and remote laboratories. And as long as the sky holds mysteries, the shadow of the Haunebu story will drift there, silent, unanswered, and compelling. Up above the tree line, the wind whistles across the empty test pads, as if echoing a question left hanging in the air. What, if anything, once lifted from this ground and vanished into the unknown? Beneath the whispers of vanished aircraft and gravity-defying machines, our journey moves downward, into the Earth itself. For as astonishing as the skies once seemed in Nazi lore, the world beneath our feet holds secrets no less haunting. It begins, not with the hum of engines, but with silence, deep, heavy, and cold. Picture a dense European forest at dawn, mist rising between pine trunks like pale ghosts. A rusted metal hatch juts from the undergrowth, half swallowed by moss and collapsed soil. No signage, no path leading in, a relic forgotten on purpose. Descend a few meters and the air tightens. Concrete walls, once smooth, now crumble beneath decades of moisture. A tunnel stretches forward, swallowed by darkness. Somewhere ahead, a drip echoes, a single reminder that this space is not dead, merely sleeping. Across Europe, this scene repeats. In the mountains of Bavaria, beneath sleepy Austrian villages, under Polish farmland, in the shadowed veins of the Czech hills, hidden beneath cities that rebuilt their lives above ground and never looked back. The remnants of a subterranean world once fueled by ambition, secrecy, and dread. These were not simple bunkers for shelter. They were networks, vast underground labyrinths engineered with precision, reinforced with steel, powered by generators, and, in many cases, connected to rail lines or air ventilation systems far too advanced for mere wartime necessity. Sites like the infamous Riese complex in Lower Silesia, carved into mountains with brutal determination, or the sprawling underground halls beneath Berchtesgaden, fortified like a buried fortress. Some tunnels stretch for miles, their ends still sealed, their maps incomplete. And yet, what exactly took place within these cold chambers? Historians offer explanations rooted in military strategy. These were command centers, Emergency escape routes, factories shielded from Allied bombing, places where jet engines, rockets, and experimental weapons were assembled away from prying eyes. But there are darker corners of the story. Testimonies from forced laborers speak of entire sections they never saw finished, guarded with unusual severity. Strange machinery wheeled into caverns they were forbidden to enter. Technicians whose names never appeared in military rosters, and construction orders that continued even when Germany's defeat was all but certain. Why continue building when collapse was inevitable? What purpose did these passages serve if not wartime function alone? Conventional answers are unsettling enough. Some researchers believe the Nazis planned a post-war resistance network, a hidden state beneath the ruins of the Reich. Others point to secret weapons programs, technological advancements still buried in rubble and dust. Then come the fringes of speculation, territory filled with whisper and rumor, tales of massive subterranean vaults housing stolen treasure, priceless art, and occult artifacts, claims of underground research into biological or psychological experimentation, and stranger still, ideas of reactoring engines, pioneering radiation experimentation, or tunnels designed for technologies far ahead of their time. A few theories, controversial yet persistent, suggest entire underground cities, fully operational environments prepared for an elite few to survive apocalypse and rebuild a new order. It sounds cinematic, dramatic, yet documents confirm that the Nazis did actively explore long-term survival infrastructure. Even now, investigators equipped with ground-penetrating radar uncover sealed chambers beneath mountain slopes. Explorers stumble upon ventilation shafts leading into forgotten corridors, and local legends speak of entire levels still flooded, collapsed, or deliberately blocked off, sealed not by nature, but by men who never intended them to be found. Could some secrets still lie concealed in those silent depths? Could evidence of lost research, vanished personnel, or technology never claimed exist just beyond the next sealed bulkhead? Or are these empty spaces simply relics, monuments to desperation, ambition, and collapse? As we stand at the edge of these buried corridors, we feel something else, a reminder that tunnels are not merely passageways. They are symbols of concealment, of power hidden in shadow, of intentions never fully revealed. And whether their secrets were mundane or extraordinary, they were meant to remain beneath the earth, locked away from history's bright light. Today, vegetation creeps over entrances, water collects on cracked floors, and rust eats through what once gleamed with purpose. Yet the space still holds a breath, as though waiting. Perhaps one day, a wall will crumble, a hatch will give way, and a chamber untouched since the last wartime breath will emerge into daylight. Perhaps then, answers will rise from the dark, or perhaps the silence will only deepen, leaving us to wonder what humanity is capable of creating and hiding when desperation and ambition collide beneath the surface of the world. And so we continue our descent into the unknown, uncovering layers never meant to be seen. Because the past, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of whispering back. From the dim corridors of buried fortresses and forgotten tunnels, our path now leads upward, into chambers not carved for machines or strategy but for something far more symbolic and far more unsettling. The forest here is ancient, its canopy thick, its silence deeper than ordinary quiet. At dawn, pale gold light filters between tall, moss-covered trunks. A narrow path climbs to a plateau where stone stands, weathered but deliberate, shaped into circles, platforms, and lines that seem to point to the horizon with purpose. Some say it feels like a forgotten temple. Others, like a stage built for a world no longer here. At the center lies a circular hall, its walls once polished black stone, now cracked and coated in lichen. Broad insignias, faded by time, remain carved into the floor like an echo of a belief system both powerful and secretive. Torches once lined the pillars. An altar-like structure rises at the far end, its surface cold and smooth. This is Wewelsburg Castle, what some call the spiritual heart of the SS, a place where ideology took on ritual form, where myth and power intertwined. Documented history tells us this fortress was remodeled under Heinrich Himmler, redesigned not as a conventional military site but as a center for ideological training, an academy for an elite vision he hoped would endure beyond war. The architecture was no accident. Circular halls, runic symbols, and mosaics referencing mythic European traditions. The black sun symbol in the North Tower floor remains one of the most disturbing and mysterious motifs associated with the regime, its 12 radiating sigils interpreted by some as an emblem of an imagined ancient order, a metaphysical source of strength and destiny. Mainstream historians argue the rituals here were symbolic, ceremonies of loyalty, oaths sworn in sacred chambers, mythic pageantry designed to bind members psychologically. But it is what lies beyond confirmed fact that casts a longer, stranger shadow. Reports speak of midnight gatherings, of candlelit rooms where select members participated in rites invoking ancestral spirits or seeking to access primordial Aryan heritage. Some documents reference a priest-like role held by senior SS leaders, while private diaries mention beliefs in reincarnation, destiny, and a cosmic struggle of races. Were these simply ideological theatrics, amplified by obsession and symbolism? Or was something deeper being pursued? The interest did not end with architecture. Himmler and his circle funded research into runes, Nordic mythology, and medieval mysticism. They collected artifacts believed to hold spiritual significance, from early European relics to objects tied to legends, most famously the so-called Holy Lance and rumored quests for the Grail. Some researchers see this as cultural nationalism, a search for mythic legitimacy, but others note that these studies extended into astrology, esoteric philosophy, and ancient pagan texts. There are accounts, still debated, of leaders studying Eastern mysticism and attempting to merge occult interpretations with pseudoscience and racial ideology. Even whispers of seances, divination experiments, and attempts to communicate with something beyond the physical world. During interrogations after the war, some SS members hinted at a belief that destiny could be shaped, ritually, spiritually, metaphysically. That power was not merely political or military, but cosmic. What that meant in practice remains uncertain. A few fringe theories go further, suggesting that certain chambers beneath Wewelsburg were designed for initiations that invoked energies or forces forgotten by modern civilization. Others propose that expeditions to places like Tibet and the Andes were not only anthropological missions, but spiritual quests, seeking lost knowledge, hidden lineages, or esoteric technologies. These ideas remain controversial, often tangled in post-war myth-making and sensationalism. Yet the foundations of these beliefs, ritual architecture, sacred symbols, obscure research divisions, are factual. We are left to wonder, were these rituals mere psychological theater for indoctrination? Or were they attempts to tap into ancient narratives, to weave history, myth, and power into a singular destiny? Today, the halls sit empty, candles long extinguished, symbols weathered by time and disuse. The silence here feels watchful, as if the walls themselves remember secrets not spoken aloud in decades. Visitors often describe a weight in the air, a sense that the space once held intense conviction, whether delusion or intent. Across Europe, and in archives around the world, fragments of documents hint at ritual instructions, mystical interpretations, and private correspondences discussing fate, sacred sites, and cosmic cycles. Many files disappeared in the final days of the war. Others remain classified or lost, and so we face a question impossible to answer fully. Were these rituals simply the fever dream pageantry of men who cloaked ideology and myth? Or did they hint at a worldview deeper and stranger than most dare consider? One where politics, mysticism, and destiny merged in ways we still struggle to comprehend. In these ruins, belief lingers like smoke after a long extinguished fire. And somewhere, perhaps buried under stone or sealed in forgotten vaults, the final pieces of this esoteric puzzle may still wait in darkness, whispering to anyone willing to listen. From the dim glow of ritual halls and whispered invocations of fate, we now move into territory where the line between myth and science bends into something stranger still, where occult curiosity meets cutting-edge wartime research and speculation stretches toward the boundaries of time itself. Deep in the forests of Lower Silesia, morning mist clings to pine trunks like pale smoke. The ground is uneven, cracked by roots and old stone, concealing the remnants of concrete foundations beneath the moss. At first glance, it feels like a forgotten industrial site, quiet, abandoned, lost to nature. But look closer, and patterns emerge. Geometric platforms, reinforced anchor points, and a strange circular basin once sealed in steel. Rumors call this place Der Riese, the Giant, part of the vast Nazi underground complex near Wenceslaus Mine. And at its heart, there is an object whispered about in post-war files, eyewitness accounts, and decades of speculation. Die Glocke, the bell. Descriptions vary, but most agree on the essentials. A large bell-shaped device encased in ceramic or metal, heavy electrical cables, strange, violet glowing liquid contained in sealed cylinders, reports of scientists and technicians developing severe radiation burns. There are declassified Allied intelligence documents referencing a mysterious device and experimental chambers. There are recorded testimonies from former SS personnel, from local workers, from engineers questioned after the war. Details are inconsistent but persistent enough to raise a single haunting question. What exactly was being tested here? Mainstream historians suggest a more grounded possibility. Advanced propulsion research, perhaps related to early jet or rocket systems. Others argue chemical energy experiments, a form of centrifuge technology, even primitive nuclear studies far from the better-known facilities. But as with many wartime secrets, fragments of fact opened space for something more speculative to grow. Polish author Igor Witkowski first brought Die Glocke to international attention in the early 2000s. From there, researchers, investigators, and fringe theorists wove together patterns, some plausible, some fantastical. One theory claims the bell was a gravity manipulation device, a precursor to technologies still beyond modern reach. Another proposes it was intended to distort electromagnetic fields, attempting to unlock exotic propulsion. And at the furthest edge of speculation lies the most unsettling claim, that the bell was part of an experiment not only to weaponize physics, but to bend time itself. Time travel, dimensional shifts, the manipulation of space-time. These ideas sound like science fiction, and perhaps they are. Yet the context of the era adds fuel to the imagination. Nazi leadership invested heavily in fringe science. They pursued unconventional energy theories, psychic research, and esoteric interpretations of reality. They funded advanced engineering far ahead of other nations, from ballistic missiles to jet aircraft. If a regime willing to explore ancient mysticism and cutting-edge physics stumbled upon a theory, no matter how speculative, that promised control over time, would they have ignored it or chased it at any cost? Witnesses described strange symptoms around the alleged device: nausea, sleep disturbances, disorientation. Plants in proximity reportedly decayed rapidly. Did these accounts reflect real high-energy experiments, or folklore born from fear and secrecy? Some researchers draw parallels to later classified projects, hinting that post-war intelligence agencies showed unusual interest in the site. Was that simply due to general technological scavenging, as seen in Operation Paperclip, or was there an unspoken curiosity about something far more extraordinary? Then there is the disappearance of scientists. Multiple specialists working in this program reportedly vanished in the final days of the war. Did they escape through hidden routes, as many high-ranking figures did? Were they taken by Allied forces? Or, if one follows the most extreme interpretation, did they vanish because of the bell itself? Today, the concrete ruins sit silent. Steel bolts rust in the earth. Underground tunnels remain sealed or flooded. On satellite imagery, unusual patterns still invite speculation. Circular foundations, reinforced chambers, and access points whose purpose remains unknown. Researchers walk the site with ground-penetrating radar, hoping to uncover forgotten vaults. Locals speak of night watches, mysterious visitors, and sudden restrictions decades after the war ended. It is easy and reasonable to assume the bell was nothing more than an ambitious wartime engineering project, lost to the chaos of collapse. Perhaps simply a centrifuge, perhaps a failed reactor, perhaps even a myth born from secrecy and destruction. And yet, the idea persists. Not because we expect to find proof, but because the question lingers in the ruins like mist at dawn. What if a regime obsessed with destiny, power, and the rewriting of history truly believed it could rewrite time itself? If the bell was real, if any fragment of those theories contains truth, then somewhere in the sealed corridors of underground Silesia, or in a forgotten intelligence file, or in a vault of technology seized and hidden after the war, the final answer may still wait, undiscovered or unspoken. Until then, we are left only with silence, and the possibility that some secrets bend far beyond history, into the unknown. From whispered experiments with time and physics, our journey now turns to something more grounded, yet in many ways even more elusive. Not a machine, not a hidden base, but fragments of truth themselves. Words, documents, secrets locked in ink and paper. For if technology can vanish into rubble and steel, then knowledge, buried or burned, can disappear even more completely. And among all the shadows cast by that era, few mysteries carry as much weight as the rumored hidden archives of the SS. Deep in the Bavarian Alps, the air is thin and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and cold stone. Snow gathers in ridges along forgotten roads, where moss creeps over fractured asphalt and roots push through cracked concrete. A mountain valley stretches below, silent and pristine, but beneath the serenity lies a layer of unease. These forests once hid bunkers, communications centers, and fortified compounds. Dispatches traveled through these mountains. Orders were drafted. Lists were signed. History, terrifying, systematic, calculated, was shaped here. And somewhere, it is said, the most sensitive SS records may have been hidden. Not the well-known archives seized in Berlin at the war's end, not the public files sorted in post-war trials, but secret collections, classified dossiers, coded directives, and personal logs kept for eyes only. The SS was not merely a military organization, it was an ideological engine. It tracked lineage, monitored allegiance, mapped underground networks, and maintained enormous registries of confiscated property, confiscated research, and targeted individuals. So the question lingers, did all of those documents surface when the regime collapsed? Or did part of its intelligence apparatus simply go dark? Most historians accept a simple answer. Many files were destroyed, burned in furnaces, shredded in frantic days before surrender, dissolved in chemical baths as Soviet forces advanced. Some were seized by Allied intelligence and remain in specialized archives, still classified or only partially accessible. That explanation is rational, documented, and likely true. But then there are the anomalies. Post-war witness statements mentioning convoys transporting trunks filled with paper into mountain tunnels. Nearby villagers recalling sealed caverns, later dynamited. A handful of post-war intelligence notes hinting at missing personnel lists and unlocated property inventories. Even more intriguing are the hints of personal diaries and coded notebooks belonging to high-ranking SS officials. Records that may have detailed internal power struggles, clandestine negotiations, or operations never acknowledged publicly. If such documents existed, what would they contain? Lists of collaborators in neutral nations? Unrecorded scientific programs? Secret financial transfers and gold shipments? Or, more unsettling still, names of individuals and networks that helped fugitives escape justice after the war? Some researchers point to intelligence debriefs, suggesting that not all information was destroyed, that certain files were removed well before Germany fell, relocated perhaps to sympathetic nations, or covertly passed to foreign agencies in exchange for safety or future influence. There are theories, too, about sealed deposits beneath lakes, in monastery vaults, even in underground chambers beneath former command centers in Eastern Europe. To this day, occasional amateur explorers and documentary crews visit places like the Hartmannswillerkopf tunnels, the Austrian Alps, the ruins beneath Wewelsburg Castle. They walk through dripping stone passages, record faint etchings on walls, and hope that behind one more bricked doorway lies a chamber where crates of untouched paper still rest. Archivists sometimes receive anonymous claims. Someone found a ledger, a microfilm strip, a coded index card. Rarely are such leads confirmed. More often, they fade into rumor, fueling a mythology built on gaps in the historical record. And yet, that mythology persists not because we seek drama, but because the question is so profound. The SS operated with meticulous detail. They documented everything, from ideological education programs to population tracking systems. That kind of organization does not simply disappear without a trace. So did the most secret files truly vanish? Or were they hidden, scattered, traded, buried, waiting for conditions that have not yet arrived? If such archives surfaced today, what truths would they reveal? Would they change our understanding of the war's final days? Of how certain individuals escaped? Of how certain ideas and networks resurfaced decades later in unexpected places? Or would they reveal something simpler, but no less haunting, an unfiltered record of human cruelty and ambition? For now, the mountains keep their silence. The sealed tunnels remain dark. The rumors drift from one generation of researchers to the next, carried by the wind across isolated ridges and quiet lakes. Perhaps there is nothing left to find. Perhaps every page of consequence has already been dusted and catalogued. Or perhaps, somewhere in a forgotten vault, in a sealed chamber carved into stone, the ink still waits. And when it meets the light again, pieces of history we thought we understood may shift in ways we cannot yet imagine. Until then, we stand at the edge of the unknown, listening and wondering what truths remain just out of reach. From whispers of hidden SS archives, papers that may yet sleep in mountain stone, we drift now toward the sea. For if the land holds secrets buried beneath rock and ice, then the oceans hold a silence even deeper. A silence broken only by waves, wind, and the memory of steel slipping beneath the surface, bound for destinations unknown. The North Atlantic at dawn is a haunting sight. Cold mist clings to a gray horizon. The sea stretches in every direction like a vast, breathing wilderness. Beneath it, currents curl around submerged ridges and forgotten wrecks. From the deck of a lone vessel, the water feels endless, an ancient world untouched by time. Yet in that stillness, history lingers. During the final months of the Second World War, German U-boats vanished into these waters. Not one or two, but dozens. Some surrendered in ports far from home. Some scuttled themselves before being captured. But some simply disappeared. No records, no messages, no wrecks confirmed for decades. Mainstream historians offer a rational explanation. Wartime chaos, incomplete logs, lost radio contact, wrecks swallowed by deep trenches. The ocean, after all, erases quickly. But what if a few submarines did not sink by accident? What if they succeeded in leaving Europe behind? Toward the end of the war, U-boats were loaded not only with soldiers, but with crates. Crates rumored to contain documents, money, art, and even specialized personnel. Convoys fled north and west. Some submarines, instead of patrolling the Atlantic, set course for remote waters. In May 1945, 2 German U-boats surfaced in Argentina after the war had ended. Their commanders surrendered peacefully. Official accounts say they carried only crew, yet whispers tell of passengers quietly disembarking at night, slipping into the rural interior. If a few subs reached South America openly, might others have arrived without announcing themselves? Then there are stranger reports. Submarines spotted near Antarctica, in the frozen South Atlantic. Allied intelligence noted unexplained naval activity there in the war's final year. Nazi plans for southern bases existed on paper. Exploratory missions to polar regions had occurred years earlier. Did U-boats attempt to reach ice-covered hideouts? Or was it simply fuel and hope running out in the most remote corner of the world? And what of the cargo? Some legends speak of gold or secret technology shipped out to stabilize a future resurgence. Others point to scientific materials, research logs, rare metals, even experimental equipment. Most historians dismiss such claims. Yet one recovered U-boat, raised from the deep decades later, was found carrying uranium oxide sealed in metal cylinders, a startling discovery that fueled speculation about hidden destinations and last-minute plans. If uranium traveled in one submarine, how many others might have transported something equally sensitive? Most explanations remain grounded. Long-range submarines fleeing surrender, officials seeking refuge abroad, supply routes for scattered units. But without complete records, speculation fills the void. Archive gaps, unusual cargo loads, and unexplained sightings linger like shadows beneath the waves. Even in Europe, relics continue to surface. Fishermen snag corroded hull fragments. Deep-sea scans reveal shapes entombed under sediment. Each wreck tells a story, but for many, the story ends abruptly, without clarity about their final mission. The ocean floor is vast, and steel corrodes slowly. Time preserves secrets there in ways Earth cannot. Which raises the question, how many submarines still lie concealed, untouched, not yet found? And if found, what might their logs and cargo reveal? Escape routes? Hidden alliances? Or simply desperation in the final hours of a war collapsing in fire and confusion? It is tempting to imagine U-boats gliding silently beneath South Atlantic waters long after Berlin fell. A handful of crews clinging to belief, carrying orders sealed in wax, unaware or unwilling to accept that the world they served had vanished. Perhaps reality is simpler. Most likely, many submarines were lost to storms or depth charges, their traces wiped away by pressure and salt. Yet mysteries endure. And as seekers scan ocean trenches and polar coasts, the unanswered questions remain. Did every submarine truly fail to reach its rumored destination? Did every secret vanish beneath the waves? Or does a forgotten hull still rest somewhere in the cold dark, its logbook sealed, its mission never revealed? Standing at the edge of the sea, where foam curls against stone and gulls cry in the wind, we are left without final certainty. Only possibilities. Only the silent pull of the deep. Until something surfaces, or until it never does, those steel ghosts remain out there, swallowed by an ocean that remembers more than it reveals. From the chilled salt air of the Atlantic and the silent paths of vanished submarines, our journey turns inland, into the heart of continental Europe, where steel once cut through forests and valleys, and iron tracks led not only to battlefields, but to the very center of Nazi power. Here, deep in woodlands and rolling hills, lies a story not of underwater ghosts, but of a train. A train built not merely for travel, but for command, control, and escape. A moving fortress of polished metal and superstition. Picture a quiet, mist-laden railway cutting through German countryside. Early morning light filters through dense pine trees. Dew clings to steel tracks, and silence rests over the land like a heavy curtain. There is no engine passing, no distant whistle, only echoes of what once thundered along these rails. This was the domain of Amerika, Hitler's personal armored train, a name curious in its ambition, chosen long before war reached global proportions. Before alliances shifted, before oceans burned with conflict, in a time when the United States was not yet enemy, but symbol, a destination, or perhaps an aspiration. Completed and modified across the 1930s and early 1940s, Amerika was no ordinary train. It was a mobile headquarters, designed as a steel-plated citadel on rails. Dozens of cars, armed escort wagons, flak guns mounted for defense, luxury cabins next to war rooms, communication centers, and encrypted radio equipment. To travel aboard it was to live in a rolling world of both velvet and iron. It served not only as transportation, but as a symbol, a display of control, a statement that wherever it traveled, the seat of authority moved with it. Allied intelligence tracked its routes obsessively. Its movements were considered highly sensitive, masked by decoys and secrecy. Yet despite its importance, appearances of Amerika were rare, shrouded in shadows even among Nazi ranks. Was this scarcity merely security protocol, or something more? As the war turned, so did the fate of the train. The name Amerika quietly vanished, replaced by Brandenburg when the United States became an adversary. Official descriptions became vague. Routes disappeared from visible logs. And near the war's end, the narrative grows foggy. According to preserved records, the train was dismantled, dispersed, broken down in the face of defeat. But some historians note peculiar gaps, vague timelines, missing technical logs, crew testimony that contradicts official statements. Trains do not simply vanish, but where, precisely, did Amerika go? This question deepens when viewed in the context of other mysterious wartime transports. Gold shipments, secret archives, high-ranking officials quietly redeployed in final weeks. Could Amerika, a secure mobile command base, have carried more than personnel? The mainstream view holds steady. It served its purpose, then ceased to exist. But the fringe imagination wanders further. If submarines and aircraft were prepared to flee collapsing Europe, might a train have played a role too? Not to cross oceans, but to move men, documents, or treasure toward hidden strongholds or covert departure points. Rail tunnels in the Alps, remote stations in mountain valleys, bunkers cut into bedrock. Some discovered only decades later, others still sealed, unexplored, rumored. A steel fortress like Amerika could, in theory, have transported not only leadership, but knowledge, technologies, diplomatic files, the calculated instruments of a future return. Was its dismantling thorough and final, or carefully staged? Then, another curiosity. Why name it Amerika at all? Was it an early symbol of intended alliance, a projection of ambition across oceans, or simply an echo of imperial grandeur meant to evoke distance and power? Names matter. They are chosen with purpose, and in a regime obsessed with symbolism, such choices rarely came without calculation. Today, only photographs, fragments, and a scattering of written references remain. Some museum pieces, a few blueprints, eyewitness accounts softened by time. The iron tracks that once carried it lie weathered, reclaimed by nature. But questions persist like the fog that settles each dawn along forgotten rail lines. Did Amerika truly meet an unremarkable end, stripped and scattered in surrender? Or did part of it, its machinery, its files, its purpose, continue unseen, somewhere beyond public record? In the stillness of forest tracks, where moss now grows over rust and sleepers turn to soil, one is left to imagine the sight of armored carriages rolling past, heavy and silent, carrying secrets that never reached the light. The mystery remains unsolved, suspended between documented history and lingering suspicion. And as with all relics of that era, one quiet question endures. If a train built to command an empire vanished into the chaos of defeat, what else may have vanished with it, still waiting to be found? From the quiet mystery of Amerika, a train that symbolized the reach and ambition of the Third Reich, our journey now turns to shadows even deeper within Europe's railways, those of the so-called missing Nazi treasure trains. If one armored train could vanish from the pages of history while carrying secrets, what might have happened to the countless other transports rumored to hold unimaginable wealth? Picture a remote railway cutting through the mist-laden forests of southern Poland or the jagged mountain valleys of the Sudetes. Tracks disappear into tunnels carved from stone. Overhead, clouds hang heavy with moisture, and in the quiet, even a bird's wing beat sounds sharp. Here, the ground seems to remember every footstep, every passing train, every secret carried beneath the steel rails. During the final chaotic months of World War II, the retreating Nazis scrambled to move valuables, gold, currency, priceless works of art, and sometimes crates of sensitive documents, from occupied territories back into Germany or toward safer havens. Railways became lifelines in this desperate exodus, but as the front lines collapsed, so too did the certainty of delivery. Trains were intercepted, sabotaged, or buried beneath snow and debris. Historical records confirm many of these transports. They were documented in logs, eyewitness accounts, and Allied intelligence reports. Yet, after the war, certain trains seemed to vanish entirely. Some are said to have been laden with gold from Reichsbank vaults, stolen art from Polish museums, or even personal treasures looted from Jewish families across Europe. Tracks lead to nowhere, tunnels end in rubble, and archives are incomplete, leaving only fragments to piece together a puzzle that defies closure. Mainstream historians suggest simple explanations: hasty retreat, destroyed rail lines, chaotic records, or trains captured by advancing Allied forces with cargo lost to bureaucratic confusion. These explanations, however plausible, do not account for persistent rumors of trains that disappeared entirely, never found, never recorded, never claimed. Local accounts in towns along old rail routes describe mysterious arrivals and departures. Witnesses recall hearing trains at night, engines echoing through valleys, yet no trace remained by morning. Some speak of trains loaded with crates bearing enigmatic markings, guarded by men who vanished as quickly as the trains themselves. Could these have been diversions, decoys, or deliberate misdirections? Or were they actual treasure-laden convoys, spirited away before anyone could intervene? There are intriguing hints in post-war intelligence files. Reports surfaced of trains buried in tunnels deep within the Carpathians, intended to be recovered when the tide of war turned. Some suggest that caches were hidden in the Sudeten Mountains, carefully concealed in concrete bunkers or abandoned mines. Yet, decades later, excavation attempts often yield little more than broken tracks, corroded wagons, and fragmented cargo. Where, then, did the true treasures go? Speculation extends beyond Europe. South American legends tell of shipments that never crossed the Atlantic openly, yet whispers suggest covert rail-to-ship transfers occurred, funneling Nazi wealth toward remote harbors. Could some trains have been moved over land to ports and vanished under night skies, their precious cargo lost in the chaos of post-war smuggling networks? Even in Poland and the Czech Republic, attempts to locate buried trains continue. Metal detectors, ground-penetrating radar, and archival research yield tantalizing clues, yet often the evidence is fragmentary. One miner recalls encountering a sealed tunnel brimming with crates marked only with Reich insignia, but permission to excavate was denied, and the memory remains a mystery. Another historian uncovered wartime telegrams hinting at emergency orders to reroute entire cargo trains, yet the final destinations were never recorded. Why do these trains continue to capture the imagination? Perhaps it is the combination of tangible history and the almost supernatural sense of absence. A train is a machine of precision, a vessel of human intention. To vanish entirely suggests planning and secrecy beyond ordinary measures. And if wealth or knowledge traveled aboard these trains, how much still lies undisturbed beneath the soil, waiting for rediscovery? Then there is the haunting question of time. Steel decays slowly. Tunnels collapse gradually. Caches sealed with care may have survived, yet remain hidden, invisible to those who search above ground. The further we move from the war's end, the more difficult recovery becomes, leaving only conjecture and fragments of memory. And so the mystery endures. Missing Nazi treasure trains are more than legend. They are reminders of the scale, ambition, and calculated secrecy that defined the final acts of a collapsing regime. They challenge us to ask not only where the trains went, but why some paths seem to vanish completely from the record. Were these simply lost in chaos, or were they intentionally concealed to be recovered later, their secrets preserved for purposes we may never know? The forests, tunnels, and mountains hold their breath over rusted tracks. Each echo of iron on stone reminds us of what was moved, what was stolen, and what was hidden. The trains themselves may never be fully recovered, yet their stories linger, suspended between fact, speculation, and the tantalizing possibility that some treasures remain untouched. In the silent valleys and overgrown railbeds, the unanswered question persists. If these trains truly disappeared without trace, who, if anyone, might have retrieved them? And how much of the Third Reich's hidden wealth, history, and ambition still lies buried, waiting for discovery? From the overgrown railways and vanished treasure trains, our journey now shifts to an artifact that has long captured imagination and fear: the Spear of Destiny, a relic said to carry a power both ancient and unsettling. Where metal met flesh in the earliest moments of recorded history, legend whispers, the world's fate may have been touched. And centuries later, drawn into the obsessions of men who sought dominion over nations. Picture a dimly lit chamber within a cathedral or a museum, its stone walls echoing the quiet passage of time. Dust motes float in slivers of light, and in the center, encased in glass or iron, rests a spear. Its shaft, weathered and darkened by centuries, is capped with a pointed metal tip, polished to a dull gleam. Every scratch, every imperfection tells a story that stretches back into the earliest days of recorded warfare, faith, and myth. This is the Spear of Destiny, also called the Holy Lance, said to be the very weapon that pierced the side of Christ during the crucifixion. Historical records trace it through the annals of empires, Rome, Byzantium, and finally into the hands of European royalty. Many believed that whoever held the spear wielded not only authority over men, but the unseen currents of fortune itself. Tales suggest that its possessor could conquer nations, influence the tides of war, even shape history. By the 20th century, the spear had become more than relic. It was symbol. Hitler, enthralled by the occult and the mystique of power, reportedly placed extraordinary importance on it. Photographs exist of him examining the weapon in Vienna's Hofburg Museum in 1938, his gaze intent, almost reverent. Was it mere fascination with antiquity, or did he truly believe in the promise whispered through centuries? Historians confirm that the spear has a well-documented provenance up to the 1930s, yet afterward, the trail grows complicated. The spear disappeared, shifted between museums and private collections, and was sometimes displayed only under heavy guard. For the Nazis, it became emblematic, a talisman entwined with ritual, ideology, and the promise of invincibility. Some accounts suggest that Hitler believed the spear could guarantee the Third Reich's supremacy, a tangible link between myth and military conquest. Beyond verified records, speculation deepens. Did rituals performed in its presence have psychological impact on those around it, heightening fervor and discipline? Was the fascination with the spear purely symbolic, or did the Nazi leadership genuinely consider it a source of mystical influence? Even today, scholars debate the line between legend and historical intent. After the war, the spear's whereabouts shifted yet again. Allied forces seized many artifacts from Nazi collections, yet certain accounts hint that pieces of the weapon, or at least its aura, were deliberately hidden or lost. Some fringe theories suggest clandestine transfers, secret vaults, or removal by unknown intermediaries. Did the spear survive intact, or was it fragmented over time? If it exists today, its presence is shrouded, carefully guarded by institutions or private hands. The allure of the spear persists because it sits at the intersection of history, legend, and the human desire for power. Unlike trains that vanish into forests or gold that may lie buried in tunnels, the spear is tangible, a link to events recorded and mythologized alike. It asks questions rather than providing answers. Can an object, however ancient, hold sway over destiny? Do symbols carry force beyond belief, shaping the actions of men who revere them? Moreover, the story of the spear intersects with other Nazi mysteries. Could its obsession have influenced strategic decisions, expeditions, or the retrieval of other esoteric artifacts? Did it inspire searches for other objects of power, like the Holy Grail, lost relics, or sacred texts? In this way, the spear becomes not merely a weapon, but a focal point in a network of ambition, ideology, and mysticism that continues to captivate researchers and enthusiasts alike. Today, standing before the Spear of Destiny, or even its replica, one cannot help but feel the weight of centuries pressing down. The shaft and tip are inert, yet in their shadow lingers a story of human desire for control over fate itself. Each dent, each discoloration, each polished surface invites reflection on the centuries of conflict, devotion, and ambition entwined with it. And so the mystery remains. The Spear of Destiny endures as both artifact and symbol, a relic that challenges the line between history and legend. Did it grant the power its legends claim, or is its influence confined to the imagination, amplified by the obsessions of those who believed? In the quiet of its display, Behind glass or stone, the spear waits. And we are left to wonder, if the destiny of nations could be held in the point of a single weapon, what secrets of power, fear, and ambition might still linger within it, hidden from sight yet impossible to forget? From the legends of the Spear of Destiny, our journey into Nazi mysticism leads us to a structure that seems to embody the ambitions, rituals, and enigmas of the SS itself. Wewelsburg Castle. Nestled atop a windswept hill in the German countryside, the castle's dark silhouette rises against the sky, its triangular tower a lone sentinel over the surrounding forests and fields. Even today, mist often curls around its stone walls, lending it a spectral presence, as if time itself hesitates at its gates. The castle's history stretches back centuries, but it is the 20th century that casts the longest shadow. Heinrich Himmler, Reichsfuhrer SS, selected Wewelsburg as more than a residence. He envisioned it as the spiritual and ideological heart of the SS. The central hall, known as the Obergruppenführersaal, is dominated by a black sun mosaic embedded in the floor, a symbol whose meaning remains debated. Was it a mere emblem of unity, or did Himmler intend it as a conduit for ritual, invoking powers beyond the visible world? The hall's cold stone surfaces and geometric precision suggest both order and secrecy, a deliberate design meant to inspire awe and obedience. During the Nazi era, the castle became a hub for ideological indoctrination, ceremonial gatherings, and possibly experiments into the occult. SS officers, selected for loyalty and perceived racial purity, were brought here to participate in rituals, study esoteric texts, and engage in ceremonies whose full content remains largely unknown. Contemporary accounts hint at strange gatherings under torchlight, with chanting and symbols whose origins Himmler claimed reached back to ancient Germanic traditions. Yet, the records are sparse, contradictory, and often censored, leaving a tantalizing gap between documented history and rumor. The triangular layout of Wewelsburg itself has invited endless speculation. Some researchers suggest the architecture mirrors cosmic or mystical principles, aligning with solar or lunar cycles, or echoing symbols of ancient secret societies. Others propose that tunnels, hidden chambers, and vaulted basements beneath the castle housed artifacts, ritual implements, or archives that vanished with the fall of the Third Reich. Could some of these subterranean spaces still hold relics, records, or secrets unknown to modern historians? Verified documents confirm that Himmler planned Wewelsburg as a center of the world for the SS, a physical and spiritual nucleus where loyalty, ideology, and symbolism converged. But what lies beyond the official archives is murkier. Eyewitness reports after the war spoke of chambers stripped of furnishings, walls scrawled with enigmatic symbols, and even artifacts that could not be identified or traced. The castle's association with the black sun symbol, in particular, has fueled decades of conjecture about esoteric practices, mystical ambitions, and the psychological engineering of power. Moreover, Wewelsburg's very isolation amplifies the mystery. Rising from the surrounding forests, it was designed to impress, intimidate, and insulate its occupants. From its windows, one can survey miles of countryside, a strategic vantage point that may have served practical military purposes, but also provided the sense of removing the SS from ordinary reality, from the mundane world of politics and human conflict, into a self-contained domain of order, hierarchy, and hidden knowledge. Historians agree on the castle's function as a ceremonial hub and ideological center, yet the extent of occult practice remains open to question. Did rituals conducted here carry supposed supernatural influence, or were they primarily psychological tools to bind officers to Himmler's vision? Were sacred artifacts, relics, or symbols hidden in secret vaults intended to be recovered in some future Nazi renaissance? And what of the post-war period? Have certain elements of Wewelsburg's past been lost forever, destroyed, or quietly removed from the public record? Today, the castle stands partially restored, open to visitors, but much of its essence remains veiled. Its museums and exhibits tell the documented story of the SS, but the shadows of rumor and legend persist. Even the black sun, polished by centuries of interpretation, seems to hold a question rather than an answer. What was intended in its creation, and what remains undiscovered beneath its surface? Standing in the central hall or walking along the ancient ramparts, one cannot escape a sense of layered time, of history pressing against myth. Every stone seems to whisper of ceremonies that may have shaped thought and fear, of ambitions that reached beyond the visible world, and of secrets that the castle, in its patient endurance, still guards. And so, Wewelsburg Castle remains a nexus of mystery, both a monument to the ideologies of men who sought power through symbols and rituals, and a silent witness to questions that linger unsolved. What truly transpired within these walls? What artifacts, messages, or echoes of esoteric ambition might still be hidden in the depths of its towers and tunnels? The answers remain elusive, leaving us to wonder in the quiet of its shadowed halls what might still lie concealed, waiting to be discovered. From the cold, silent expanse of space, the moon hangs in the sky like a pale sentinel, its cratered surface reflecting sunlight across the void. On Earth, it has long captured human imagination, a place of wonder, mystery, and speculation. But among the most enduring and provocative of rumors is the claim that the Nazis, in the final years of the Third Reich, sought not just dominion over Earth, but a foothold on this distant satellite, a secret lunar base, hidden from the world, a vision of technological ambition that stretches the limits of plausibility. The idea of a Nazi moon base is rooted in the context of late-war desperation and obsession with advanced technology. As the Allies closed in from east and west, the Nazi regime poured resources into unconventional weapons programs. The V-2 rockets that first touched the edge of space, the Haunebu flying discs, and the ambitious Ahnenerbe expeditions searching for forgotten knowledge. Could these experiments have extended beyond Earth into the vacuum of space? The evidence is fragmented, speculative, and often contradictory. Yet some declassified documents hint at projects aimed at long-range rocketry, paired with designs that, according to theorists, could support orbital stations or even extraterrestrial installations. Eyewitness accounts, memoirs of engineers, and reports from post-war investigations fuel the intrigue. Certain engineers reportedly claimed knowledge of plans for a Wunderwaffe that could reach beyond the atmosphere, while others described secret construction projects in remote regions of Germany, Antarctica, and South America, sites that might have served as launch points or storage facilities. Could these terrestrial operations have been precursors to something far more ambitious? And if so, why would such plans have remained hidden for decades? One of the most persistent elements of the legend involves the use of advanced propulsion technology, often tied to accounts of Haunebu flying discs or other experimental craft. These stories suggest vehicles capable of reaching the moon, operating autonomously or under remote control. Skeptics dismiss such claims as exaggeration or misinterpretation, yet the mystique persists because of the regime's documented obsession with secrecy, engineering prowess, and the blending of scientific research with ideological vision. The moon itself, a barren, airless world, provides no corroborated evidence of human construction. Yet satellite imagery and the study of lunar craters have occasionally sparked speculation among conspiracy researchers who point to irregular formations or reflective surfaces as possible artificial structures. Mainstream science attributes these to natural geological processes, but the allure of the unexplained, of human ingenuity reaching into the heavens at a time when conventional space travel was still decades away, continues to captivate the imagination. Adding to the mystery are post-war accounts of German scientists transported under Operation Paperclip and other secret programs. Some claim that these engineers continued advanced aerospace research under the auspices of Allied governments, potentially extending concepts first conceived in the Third Reich. If even a fraction of these theories hold any truth, one wonders whether knowledge of extraterrestrial bases, or designs for them, persisted quietly, influencing Cold War-era rocket and satellite programs long after the fall of Nazi Germany. The intersection of mythology, ideology, and technological ambition is striking. The Nazis' fascination with the esoteric and the occult, evident in organizations like the Thule and Vril Societies, mingled with their scientific pursuits. Could the myth of a moon base be, in part, an extrapolation of their broader obsession with hidden power and cosmic significance? Did secret experiments aim to transcend earthly limitations, seeking dominion not just over nations, but over space itself? Historians largely agree that no verifiable lunar installations exist, and that the technical challenges of building such a base in the 1940s would have been immense, if not insurmountable. Yet the rumor persists, nourished by gaps in the historical record, tantalizing fragments of testimony, and the human tendency to imagine the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. Every account, every reference to advanced rocketry or disc-shaped craft adds to a tapestry of speculation that blurs the line between fact and legend. Looking upward at the moon today, one cannot escape a sense of layered mystery. Its surface is both familiar and alien, scientifically mapped yet still evocative of the unknown. If the Nazis entertained visions of lunar conquest, what became of those designs? And could remnants of their ambitions still linger in archives, artifacts, or the imagination of those who study them? Are these stories mere flights of fancy, or do they hint at secrets lost to history, waiting to be uncovered, waiting to be... The moon's silent craters and shadowed valleys remain untouched by human hands, yet the legend of the Nazi lunar base endures, a reminder of the ambition, secrecy, and fascination with the impossible that marked the darkest chapters of the 20th century. It leaves us with a single, unsettling question. What might still lie hidden in the space between history and myth, waiting for someone to look closely enough to find it?